Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where the pace is slow, the stories are long, and the past unfolds gently, one dusty moment at a time. Tonight, we drift back into the damp, cobbled streets and smoke-streaked skies of a medieval city. The world we're entering is cluttered with timbered houses, bustling with shouting vendors, and clattering hooves, thick with the tang of tannery runoff, and echoing with church bells that toll across the city at all hours. It is a place of both noise and silence, squalor and splendor. You are not a knight, or a noble, or a learned cleric. You are simply you, an ordinary person living in the crowded heart of the Middle Ages, trying to get through the day. But even a single day in this world is a feat of endurance, and we will begin there. Walking beside you as you stumble into a waking life that is strange, pungent, and relentlessly demanding. After that, we'll follow the trail of a historical figure who dared to rise up against the crown, only to vanish into legend. Then, we will look beneath modern London to uncover what the bones of the dead whisper about how they lived and died. And finally, we'll rise into another stratum of this same medieval world, a merchant's home, where perfumed sheets, ornate salt cellars, and roaring hearths tell a very different story of city life. But first, your feet touch the filthy straw floor of your rented tenement room. You pull on rough wool, open your crooked wooden door, and step out into the medieval morning. Let us begin. Imagine waking to the clamor of voices rising from the alley below. The floor beneath your mattress little more than a rough sack filled with straws, cold and damp. Your breath clouds in the air. The hearth in your one-room tenement has long gone cold, its smoke-stained stones giving off no warmth. The only light trickling in comes from a narrow slit of a window, unglazed, through which the scent of the street seeps in. Rot, smoke, and the musk of livestock. You are a resident of a medieval city. Perhaps it's London, or Paris, or York. The name matters little. What defines your experience here is not the city's size or fame, but its density. Houses lean in precariously over narrow streets. Wooden beams creak. The alley outside is never truly silent, even at dawn. You begin your day by hauling a bucket of water from a communal well down the street. The water is cloudy and likely unsafe to drink. Few people trust it, though few alternatives exist. The streets are slick with waste, human and animal. Chamber pots are emptied into the gutters with a shouted warning, though not everyone listens. The filth runs down toward the center of the street, flowing in shallow ruts worn by cartwheels and centuries of use. There is no privacy. You share your building with other families. Walls are thin. Conversations, arguments, coughing, and snoring pass through without resistance. The building itself sways when someone moves too quickly on the upper floor. Fires are frequent, and feared each tenement is a tinderbox, packed with flammable rushes and dry timbers. Your workday begins at sunrise, if not earlier. You might be an apprentice in a tanner's workshop, where hides are soaked in vats of urine and lime. Or you scrub pots at a tavern. Perhaps you help your mother mend clothes by the firelight, your fingers raw from wool and your lungs thick with smoke. Whatever your trade, your work is grueling, and rest is a luxury. In the market square, you shuffle past vendors selling bread that is more crust than crumb, meat that has been generously salted to cover the smell, and vegetables with more spots than flesh. The smell of the fishmonger's stall is sharp, pungent, almost sweet with decay. Behind him, a row of open latrines trickles into the same stream where children play. You do your best to avoid the guildmasters, whose eyes scan for unlicensed sellers. If you're caught selling bread without permission, or weaving without paying dues, the fine could ruin you. Or worse, you could be locked in the stoxa, public humiliation that draws gears, thrown refuse, and sometimes worse. The city is noisy always. Church bells mark the hours. Traders shout prices. Hoofs clatter. Dogs bark. In the narrow passages between houses, neighbors gossip, argue, and sometimes brawl. You'll learn to sleep through it, or not to sleep at all. Sanitation is rudimentary. A rat scurries past your feet near the butcher's stall. Flies swarm the hanging carcasses. Disease is never far. In the summer, the air grows heavy and foul. In winter, cold seeps through stone and bone alike. There are no antibiotics, no central heating, no running water. Soap is rare and expensive. Many wash only hands and face, and even that not daily. Yet the rhythm of life carries on. the rhythm of hoofbeats over stone, of bells in the towers, of hammers against iron. Children play with sticks and stones, sing crude rhymes, and dart between carts. Women gossip while scrubbing linen by the river. The baker's apprentice dozes in the sun, leaning on a sack of flour. Even here, amid the discomfort and filth, life finds patterns. As night falls, you return to your shared home. Candles are dear and oil lamps flicker with weak light. Darkness settles quickly. You eat a crust of bread, some weak ale, perhaps a bit of cheese if you're lucky. You huddle under your cloak, feeling the chill seep through the stones. And with the ever-present scent of soot and sewage in your nose, you try to sleep. But sleep does not come easily here. The night is filled with sounds, the drunkard's song, the distant shout of a constable, the creak of timber shifting above your head, and somewhere a dog howls. This is the rhythm of a medieval city, a rhythm of hardship, of survival, of bodies pressed close together in dark corners and smoky rooms. You live not in isolation, but in constant contact with others, with grime, with danger, and with the deep pulse of a world that knows neither privacy nor peace. And this was only a day. The year is 1381, and England is on the brink. The king is young, just 14 years old. The countryside is restless. For decades, peasants have borne the weight of war, plague, and relentless taxation. And now something stirs in the hearts of those long bowed by the burden of obedience. Tonight, we follow the slow-burning story of a man named Wat Tyler, ordinary craftsman who, for a fleeting moment, led one of the most extraordinary uprisings in English history. But before we meet Wat, we must understand the simmering world that birthed his rebellion. It had been a grim century. The Black Death had swept through England just 30 years earlier, killing nearly half the population. Fields went untilled. Villages emptied. Entire families vanished. Yet, in the strange void left by the plague, something unexpected occurred. Laborers found themselves, for once, in demand. Wages rose. Serfs moved from manor to manor, seeking better terms. And the old order, rigid and feudal, began to crack. But the ruling classes were not content to let this change unfold. Laws like the Statute of Laborers were passed, fixing wages and forbidding workers from leaving their lords. Taxation intensified, especially to fund the king's costly wars in France. The final insult came in the form of the hated poll tax, a flat charge levied on every man and woman over a certain age, regardless of wealth. And so the spark was lit. Across Essex and Kent, men gathered in secret, whispering of injustice. They rallied around the cry for freedom, freedom from feudal dues, from labor restrictions, from the grinding pressure of a system that refused to acknowledge their humanity. It is in this moment that we first glimpse Wat Tyler, not a noble or scholar, but a Tyler by trade, a man who laid roofs in Kent and lived modestly. His name emerges quietly at first, in the records of a rebellion growing louder by the day. What made Wat Tyler rise? We do not know for certain. Some accounts speak of a violent incident with a tax collector and his daughter. Others suggest that Tyler was chosen by the Commons for his charisma, his clarity, and his willingness to speak plainly in the face of power. Whatever the cause, by June of 1381, Tyler was at the head of a massive, swelling force of rebels. They marched on Canterbury, then on to London. They came not as a rabble, but as a movement, disciplined, organized, and burning with purpose. They called for the end of serfdom, the abolition of labor laws, and the execution of royal advisers they saw as corrupt. Some bore banners with the words of the priest John Ball, who famously asked, "When Adam delved an Eve span, who then was the gentleman?" In London, chaos unfolded. Prisons were opened. The Savoy Palace, seat of the despised Duke of Lancaster, was burned to the ground. Royal officials were dragged from sanctuary and beheaded. The Archbishop of Canterbury, a figure of both political and religious authority, was executed on Tower Hill. The message was clear. The old order was not sacred. And yet, amid the flames and fury, Tyler sought negotiation. On June 14th, he met with King Richard II at Mile End. The king, alarmed and outnumbered, agreed to many demands, abolishing serfdom, granting pardons, and promising reforms. It was a stunning concession. Many rebels returned home, believing the battle won. But Tyler knew better. The next day he met the king again, this time at Smithfield. Here, the accounts diverge. Some say Tyler approached boldly, dismounted, and called for water and a drink, a gesture interpreted by some as arrogance. He spoke clearly and calmly, outlining the demands once more, but tensions flared. Words were exchanged. A royal servant insulted him. Tyler reached for his dagger. And then, suddenly, a blow was struck. The Lord Mayor of London lunged, and Tyler was run through with a sword. He staggered back, called for help, and was struck again. His body fell in the street. Later that day, he was beheaded. His head, like so many before him, was mounted on a pike and displayed for all to see. The king, seeing the crowd on edge, rode forth and declared, "I am your captain now. Follow me." Amazingly, the rebels obeyed. Without Tyler, their momentum faltered. Within weeks, the revolt was crushed. Promised pardons were revoked. Leaders were hunted and hanged. The old order reasserted itself, firmer than before. And yet the world had changed. The revolt had shown what could happen when common people, long held silent, found their voice. Though the demands were not met immediately, the ideas planted that summer took root. Over the next century, serfdom declined. Laborers negotiated for better terms. And the memory of Wat Tyler lingered, not as a king nor a saint, but as a roofer who dared to raise his head above the rooftops. His name would echo through rebellions to come, his story told in quiet corners. And taverns reminded generations that even in a world bound by rigid hierarchy, resistance was possible. Tonight we remember him not in shouts or banners, but in whispers, in the stillness after the fire dies down. In the long silence of history, where a craftsman once stood tall, for just a moment, and said, "No more." Beneath the cobbled streets and quiet churchyards of modern-day London lies another city entirely. One made not of buildings, but bones. Tonight, we descend into this hidden layer of the city. We explore the forgotten cemeteries, plague pits, overflowing charnel houses where tens of thousands of medieval Londoners were laid to resonate with grandeur, but in haste. Their names are mostly lost, their stories untold. But their presence lingers, silent and patient, beneath centuries of stone. To understand London's mass graves, we must first return to a time of collapse, the mid-14th century, when the Black Death arrived. It was 1348. Trade ships, moving swiftly along the southern coast, brought more than just spices and cloth. They carried a sickness that no one could name. Symptoms came quickly. Fever, vomiting, painful swellings in the groin and armpits. Death followed in days. Entire families succumbed. Houses were boarded shut. The sound of wailing became a constant undertone to daily life. London was utterly unprepared. With a population of roughly 80,000 at the time, the city saw tens of thousands perish within months. Churchyards filled rapidly. Traditional burials with prayers and space for each soul became impossible. The dead could not be buried fast enough. And so began the grim construction of mass burial sites, plague pits, dug deep into soft ground, designed to receive hundreds of bodies at once. One of the most infamous of these sites was located in East Smithfield, just outside the city walls. The pit was commissioned by King Edward III himself in 1349, and was intended to bring some order to the mounting crisis. Archaeological work centuries later would uncover the remains of over 2,400 people in a relatively small area, men, women, and children alike, placed carefully in rows, in layers. Unlike the chaotic image one might imagine, the East Smithfield pit showed surprising signs of care. The dead were not thrown in haphazardly, but laid out with a kind of grim dignity, wrapped in shrouds, aligned head to foot. Priests likely stood nearby, reciting abbreviated rites as the earth was filled in. But this was just one pit among many. Others were more desperate, dug in fields behind churches, in unused corners of monastic land, or even directly within city cemeteries where space had long since run out. The smell of decay became a part of life. Gravediggers worked endlessly, many falling ill themselves. There are records from the time of bodies being piled onto carts and dragged through the streets. Bells tolled constantly. Monks and friars, brave and overburdened, walked from house to house offering last rites, until they too succumbed. By the time the plague passed, nearly half the city's population was gone. But the Black Death was not the only time London turned to mass graves. In the centuries that followed, the city was racked by further plagues. In 1361, 1375, 1400, 1430, 1471, 1499, and on into the 16th and 17th centuries. Each time, the dead returned in uncountable numbers. Each time, space had to be found for them. Over time, London became layered with its own mortality. Beneath monasteries, within the grounds of hospitals, under marketplaces, and behind tenements, the bones accumulated. One of the most haunting discoveries came in the 1980s, during construction at the site of the Royal Mint. There, archaeologists found not only plague victims, but people killed during the Peasants' Revolt. Victims of famine and others buried without ceremony. The site had been used for centuries as a place of quiet disposal. Today, these layers still remain. Some were disturbed during the digging of the London Underground, when engineers reported uncovering entire skeletons. Others surfaced during railway construction or modern redevelopment projects. In each case, teams of archaeologists carefully exhumed the remains, cataloging them bone by bone. From these bones, stories have emerged. Dental records revealed diets of grain and ale. Fractures hint at hard labor. Signs of arthritis, childhood malnutrition, and chronic illness paint a picture of lives lived in physical strain. Some show signs of violence, broken ribs, blade marks. Others bear the unmistakable traces of leprosy or syphilis. Yet in this vast sea of anonymity, one theme holds. The dead of medieval London, though buried without names, were never entirely forgotten. Their presence shaped the city's development, limiting where buildings could rise, determining where churches were rebuilt, where streets turned oddly to avoid sacred ground. And in recent decades, the respect shown to these remains has grown. When the Crossrail Tunnel was dug in the 2010s, workers uncovered one of the largest plague pits yet, near Farringdon Station. Their bones were treated with reverence, studied for insight, and reinterred respectfully. In the stillness of night, it is easy to imagine the hum of footsteps over those ancient resting places, the ceaseless march of life above the silence of death. The baker's boy delivering loaves, unaware he walks atop the site of a 14th century burial, the office worker sipping tea in a building whose basement once held coffins, the busker strumming his guitar where monks once chanted over mass graves. In London, the past never truly vanishes. It lies just below the surface, patient, quiet, waiting to be remembered. Tonight, as you drift off, know this: the city may shine and bustle above, but beneath it all is a hidden realm of memory, a vast and unseen archive of lives that once were. Not kings or nobles, but ordinary souls, just like you, whose final journey brought them here, to the soft and shifting earth of London's forgotten graves. As dawn breaks over the timbered rooftops of medieval London, a very different kind of day begins, not for a peasant or an apprentice, but for a wealthy merchant. Imagine waking not in a crowded tenement or Fleardon dormitory, but in a spacious chamber above your own shop on Cheapside. Sunlight filters in through latticed windows of polished horn or imported glass. The bedding beneath you is thick wool, stuffed with goose down. Your robes hang freshly brushed nearby, clasped with a silver brooch, perhaps Flemish, perhaps Italian, perhaps made in your own city, or a man-or, perhaps a woman of trade, and that means power. In medieval London, merchants were the engines of prosperity. Unlike nobles who inherited their place, you earned yours through skill, foresight, and risk. Your days are filled not with farming or fighting, but with calculation. Weights, measures, ledgers, and most importantly, relationships. Your shop is your kingdom. Perhaps you trade in cloth, the most lucrative business in the city. Fine wool from the Cotswolds, dyed a deep blue with expensive woad, destined for the doublets of noblemen. Or you might be a vintner, importing French wine stored in tall clay amphorae. Or a mercer, dealing in silk and velvet from Lombardy. Every morning begins with accounting. You sit by candlelight, using a quill and sand to write clean lines of profit and loss. Your clerk stands nearby reciting tallies. Understand money, not just in coin, but in its movement, how a cask of wine bought cheap in Gascony might yield 3 times its value at a feast in Westminster. By mid-morning, your doors are open. Customers, some wealthy, others humble, filter through. You speak not only English but fragments of French, Dutch, or even Arabic, picked up from years of dealing with foreign merchants at the Steelyard or the Hanseatic warehouses by the Thames. Unlike nobles who deal in bloodlines, your status depends on reputation. One bad deal, one missed shipment, could tarnish your name. So you cultivate trust through honesty, punctuality, and shrewd alliances. You sponsor a local church to curry favor. You loan money to a rising guild. You host visiting traders in your home, offering them roasted duck, sweetmeats, and warm bedding in exchange for long-term trade. But with wealth comes expectations. If you're a member of the Drapers' Guild or the Worshipful Company of Fishmongers, you're bound by a strict code. Guild meetings, held in tall halls lit with wax candles, involve hours of discussion about quality control, pricing rules, apprenticeships, and charitable obligations. And speaking of apprentices, you likely have several teenage boys brought from the countryside to learn your trade. You feed and clothe them. You teach them numbers, etiquette, and the subtleties of deal-making. After 7 years, if they prove worthy, they'll become freemen themselves, able to open their own shop. Your home, meanwhile, reflects your station. The ground floor is your shop open to the street, filled with goods. The second floor is your workspace and reception room. You might even have a small office, paneled in oak, where contracts are signed. Above that, your family lives. Your wife, children, servants, and perhaps a visiting cousin from Bruges. Meals are generous. Ale flows freely. Spices like cinnamon and pepper grace your dishes not every day, but often enough. You have access to luxuries that even minor nobility envy. A bathtub, imported linens, a small library. And on feast days, you wear a fur-lined cloak that proclaims your success. Still, life isn't without danger. Markets can crash, ships sink. A dishonest partner in Flanders might vanish with your silver. Political tides turn quickly, kings tax merchants heavily, or confiscate goods during wartime. And always there is plague. The merchant class is particularly vulnerable. You meet with strangers, you touch goods handled by dozens, send sons to trade abroad. One sniffle in Bordeaux could be death in London a week later. But for now, in these years of calm, business thrives. You attend banquets at the Guildhall, where roasted boar is served on trenchers and minstrels play softly into the evening. You speak with aldermen. You dream of becoming mayor one day. It has happened before, men of trade rising so high they dine with dukes. You sponsor the arts. Perhaps a tapestry is being woven to commemorate your voyage to Lisbon, or you hire a scribe to pen a family chronicle. You pay for the restoration of a stained glass window in St. Mary-le-Bow where your children will someday marry. You are not a noble. You are not a peasant. You are something new. The merchant elite class of people who remake the city, one transaction at a time.
Yes.
As twilight falls, you step onto your balcony, overlooking the candlelit streets. A bell tolls from a nearby chapel.
Oh.
Far below, a beggar limps past your door. A priest recites Latin. A dog barks in the distance. London sleeps fitfully, feverishly, full of commerce and danger and dreams. And you, merchant of the Middle Ages, sleep too, knowing that tomorrow brings risk and reward and 100 small choices that will shape the destiny of your house for generations. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn in a cramped barracks room within the walls of a gladiator school. A ludus. The air is thick with the mingled scents of sweat, leather, and unwashed bodies. Your limbs are stiff from the previous day's drills, muscles aching under a thin layer of grime and old bruises. Outside, the city is beginning to stir, but your world is confined to this place of hard stone floors, wooden training weapons, and iron bars. There is no luxury here, only the rigid rhythm of training, discipline, and preparation for the day's grueling exercises. The morning begins with a cold wash of water, drawn from a basin that serves dozens of men. You step out into the courtyard, surrounded by fellow gladiators, some with scarred faces, others barely out of their teenage years. The air carries the distant clang of metal on wood as trainers rehearse the precise movements needed for combat. Every step, every strike, every dodge must become second nature. The diet is carefully measured, designed to build strength, but not excess weight. You eat thick porridge, bread, beans, and occasionally dried fruits. Meat is a rare luxury, reserved for injuries or special occasions. You drink a mix of water and vinegar, the Roman pasca, to stay hydrated. Your trainers are strict and unyielding. They push you beyond pain, reminding you that the crowd demands spectacle, but that only the strongest survive. Days are filled with repetitive drills, sword strikes, shield blocks, net throws, practiced endlessly on wooden dummies or against other trainees. Injuries are common. Bruises, cuts, sprains, and broken bones are part of the routine. After training, you receive treatment from medics who stitch wounds, apply poultices, and massage tired muscles. Rest is minimal. There is no room for weakness here. Despite the brutality, camaraderie develops among the fighters. You share whispered stories of home, of lost families, of dreams deferred. Sometimes you glimpse moments of hope, a well-fought match, praise from a trainer, or the promise of freedom for the best performers. Yet always looming is the awareness of the arena. When your turn comes, you will step into the sunlight, sand beneath your feet, and the roar of tens of thousands ringing in your ears. You will fight for survival, for glory, or for a life that few ever earn. But until then, the days stretch long and exhausting, filled with sweat, repetition, and quiet fear. This is the life of a gladiator. Less of hero, more of a man bound by chains of discipline and chance. As we leave the dust and discipline of the training yard behind, let us now turn our gaze toward a very different figure, one whose name still echoes in the corridors of Roman memory: Emperor Commodus. The year is 192 CE, and the Roman Empire is still vast, still powerful, though cracks have begun to form beneath its marble veneer. Amid political tension and shifting allegiances, a curious and unsettling chapter unfolds when the ruler of the known world chose to descend into the arena. Not as a distant sponsor of games, but as a participant. Imagine the city of Rome in anticipation. Banners are unfurled along the Via Sacra. Vendors line the streets selling roasted nuts, honey cakes, and spiced wine. Murmurs ripple through the crowd, not just about the games, but about the emperor himself. Commodus is to appear in person, and not on a platform of gold and velvet, but in armor with a weapon in hand. Born in 161 CE, Lucius Aurelius Commodus was the son of the revered philosopher King Marcus Aurelius. Where his father wrote meditations on duty and self-restraint, Commodus grew into a man fascinated with strength, spectacle, and above all, himself. In an early age, he was drawn to physical prowess and personal glory. He fancied himself the reincarnation of Hercules, not metaphorically, but literally. He donned the lion's skin, wielded a club, and had statues cast with his own face atop the muscular body of the demigod. But his passion for the arena went far beyond symbolism. Commodus trained in the styles of gladiators. He built private practice spaces. He invited instructors from the ludi into the palace. And eventually, he stepped onto the sand not just to observe, but to perform. The Colosseum, then known as the Flavian Amphitheater, would become the stage for these imperial indulgences. Picture it now, the massive oval rising from the earth, its outer walls catching the warm Roman sun. Inside, tens of thousands gather. The crowd hums with excitement, not unlike modern spectators at a theater or sporting event. Then he appears. Commodus, tall and theatrical, enters the arena, not in senatorial robes, but in gladiatorial attire. Some days he plays the secutor, with helmet and short sword. Other days, he fights as a bestiarius, the animal fighter, armed with javelins and bow. Always, he is surrounded by the drama of display, his golden armor glinting, his posture rehearsed. But this was no fair contest. The opponents he faced were handpicked. Some were maimed, others deliberately weakened, and many were forced to submit. He once claimed to have killed 100 lions in a single morning, though it is more likely they were tethered or drugged. He is said to have stood atop the arena, bow in hand, shooting ostriches and giraffes with practiced detachment. And yet the people cheered, whether from awe or fear or perhaps simply from the pageantry. The Roman public filled the seats each time Commodus fought. Senators, however, watched with dread and embarrassment. For an emperor to perform as a gladiator was, in Roman eyes, a collapse of boundaries. The ruler, they believed, should embody dignity, not spectacle. Commodus cared little for such opinions. He renamed months of the calendar after himself. He had coins minted with inscriptions like Hercules, Romanus. He referred to himself not as Caesar, but as champion of the arena. But behind the curtain of applause, whispers grew. His vanity, his cruelty, his obsessions, all fed the resentment of the Senate and the Praetorian Guard. Eventually, in 192 CE, conspirators within the palace smuggled in a wrestler, one of Commodus's own sparring partners, who strangled the emperor in his bath. The arena fell silent. With his death, the empire was plunged into a brief but turbulent civil war. Yet the strange legacy of Commodus endured. A man who blurred the line between emperor and entertainer, between ruler and performer. His games, his posturing, his desire to embody Hercules, all served to remind Rome that the arena was not merely a place of violence, but a mirror for the ambitions and anxieties of the powerful. And so, long after his golden armor tarnished and his statues crumbled, Commodus remains in memory, not as a warrior, nor even a leader, but as the emperor who could not resist the call of the crowd or the glitter of the arena's sand beneath his feet. We remain within the boundaries of the great arena, but now we descend, not metaphorically, but physically. Beneath the worn stones of the Colosseum lies another world entirely, a shadowy underbelly of ropes and pulleys, cages and corridors. It is a forgotten place of whispers and echoes, where the games were choreographed in darkness. The Romans called it the hypogeum, the underground. A network of chambers, trapdoors, elevators, and passageways that transformed the Colosseum into a living machine of illusion and surprise. Constructed during the reign of Emperor Domitian in the late 1st century CE, after the Colosseum itself was already complete. The hypogeum expanded the arena's possibilities dramatically. No longer were gladiators and animals let in from exterior gates. Now, they could appear suddenly, rising from the earth like spirits, to the gasps and cheers of thousands. Imagine you are there, in the gloom below. The scent is heavy. Animal musk, damp wood, oiled winches, and human sweat. Torchlight flickers on rough stone walls. Slaves and workers move quietly, efficiently, each knowing their task. A lion paces restlessly in its cage. A gladiator kneels in silence, waiting for the moment when the floor above will open and daylight will come flooding in. Dozens of elevators, operated by teams of men pulling ropes in synchrony, lifted cages, platforms, even entire set pieces up to the arena floor. Engineers devised elaborate systems of levers and counterweights, allowing stage managers to time entrances with almost theatrical precision. A single game might feature multiple such reveals, wild boars appearing to surprise a group of hunters, or entire artificial forests springing up for a mock battle. One emperor staged a sea creature rising from a pool of dyed blue water, complete with mechanical jaws. The crowd roared. They weren't watching reality, they were watching spectacle wrapped in blood and wonder. The hypogeum was also a place of waiting. Gladiators, hardened by months of training, were kept in holding cells, listening to the muffled roars above them. It's uncertain if they would walk out as champions or corpses. Animals brought from across the empire, tigers from the Caucasus, crocodiles from the Nile, elephants from North Africa, were stored in iron cages, starved just enough to make them unpredictable. And here, too, was the hidden labor of the empire. The anonymous workers, stagehands, engineers, carpenters, animal handlers, whose names are lost to time. They maintained the elevators, ensured mechanisms didn't fail, wrangled panicked beasts, and swept up the blood after each spectacle. We know of these mechanisms in part because of archaeological excavations and careful study of ancient texts. Wooden posts once anchored the elevator systems. Grooves in the stone show where platforms were guided. Small alcoves reveal where workers waited for cues. Even graffiti carved into the walls, rough sketches of animals, gladiators, or initials, speak to the lives lived below, and yet much remains uncertain. No blueprints have survived. The precise choreography of a game is still largely imagined. Historians debate how many trapdoors the arena had or whether certain effects were even mechanically possible. That is the allure of the hypogeum. It is part engineering marvel, part enigma. A reminder that beneath every performance, even one soaked in violence, lies a hidden world of preparation, fear, and fragile ingenuity. Over time, as the Roman Empire declined, so too did the games. The Colosseum fell into disuse, then into ruin. Earth filled the arena floor. The hypogeum was forgotten, buried beneath centuries of soil, stone, and silence. Only in the 19th and 20th centuries was it excavated again, revealing this hidden infrastructure, like veins beneath the skin of the ancient city. Today, the Colosseum stands partially restored. Tourists walk where emperors once sat. But few realize that beneath their feet lies a labyrinth where human effort met imperial spectacle, and where history, in its quietest, most overlooked places, waits in shadow. Now, let us climb figuratively and literally, from the damp corridors beneath the arena to the marble benches reserved for the Roman elite. From the shadows of the hypogeum, we ascend into sunlight and social hierarchy. You are no longer a tenant of the insulate or a fighter awaiting your turn. Now, you are seated among the patricians, Rome's noble families. Draped in fine linen, shaded by your household slaves holding an awning or fan, you arrive at the Colosseum not merely for entertainment, but for prestige, connection, and visibility. The Colosseum was more than an arena. It was a theater of status. Entry was not equal. Your seat reflected your social rank, quite literally inscribed in stone. Senators sat closest to the action, in reserved marble chairs, sometimes even with their names etched into the seats. Behind them, the equestrian class filled the next rows. Farther still sat freedmen, citizens of lower status. And finally, high in the rafters, sometimes standing, women and the poor. From your elite vantage point, the events below were curated for your delight. Exotic beasts, chariots, naval battles, gladiators whose lives could be extended or extinguished with a mere gesture from the emperor. You might even recognize some of the gladiators by name. Celebrities of a brutal sport. And should one capture the crowd's adoration, the patrician class might sponsor them, even bet on them, with quiet conversation and coin. But your presence at the games was also political. To be seen, to be dressed appropriately, to applaud when the emperor appeared, these were part of the silent rituals of Roman elite society. The Colosseum was a place where loyalty was performed as much as spectacle was viewed. And the elite did not only watch, they funded. Wealthy patricians, eager to gain favor with the emperor, or climb the cursus honorum, the ladder of Roman public offices, often financed the games themselves. These munera were public gifts, lavish demonstrations of wealth, civic virtue, and allegiance. To sponsor 100 pairs of gladiators or import a rhinoceros from Africa was an investment in social capital. After the games, you might retreat to your domus on the Palatine Hill. Their mosaic floors and painted walls would reflect scenes not unlike what you had just witnessed. The imagery of power, conquest, and wild nature subdued by Roman order was central to elite identity. Even in their leisure, the patricians reaffirmed Rome's glory and their place within it. But the lives of the patricians extended far beyond the arena. Their days were structured, disciplined, governed by obligations both civic and domestic. A Roman nobleman might rise before dawn to greet clients at the morning salutatio, hear petitions, settle disputes, or give alms. These relationships, patronus and clients, were the fabric of Roman politics and society. In the afternoon, after attending a trial, a senate session, or overseeing their estates, the patricians dined in style. The cena was a lengthy affair, 3 courses served reclining on couches, accompanied by conversation, readings, or music. Dishes included dormice rolled in honey and poppy seeds, flamingo tongue, oysters, figs soaked in wine. Slaves moved silently to refill cups, adjust cushions, or bring fresh water for washing hands. Yet even here, relaxation was strategic. Guests were carefully chosen. Alliances were reaffirmed. Rumors were traded like coin. The patricians, despite their wealth, lived under pressure to maintain appearances, to keep their lineage pure, to produce heirs, to serve the state, to die nobly if called. Their villas may have offered marble colonnades and perfumed fountains, but they were also repositories of ancestral masks, imagines, grim reminders of their duty to live up to the greatness of those who came before. So, while the elite might enjoy silk and citrus fruits imported from the East, or philosophize in their private libraries, they too were caught in Rome's relentless machinery, a hierarchy with no breaks. And at the very top sat the emperor. To be a patrician was to live near power but never secure from its whims. A misspoken word could mean exile. Suspected disloyalty could lead to disgrace, or worse. The closer you stood to the sun, the more likely you were to burn. As the centuries wore on, the gap between rich and poor grew ever wider. The Roman elite became increasingly detached from the realities of the city they ruled, retreating to country villas, investing in idle luxury, even as grain riots flared and the empire fractured. Yet their marble homes crumbled just as surely as the wooden floors of the insulae. In the end, history remembers them all, not for their wealth, but for their world. A world of extremes, opulence and squalor, brutality and refinement, innovation and collapse. And from this distance, both nobleman and laborer fade into the same gentle dust. Imagine this. You rise in darkness. The fire is out. The cold bites through your worn wool cloak, and the sand beneath your blanket is already dry as ash. You stretch your legs, stiff from sleeping on hard ground. The camels grumble before you even move. It's another day in the desert. You are not a merchant. You are not the man whose goods will make him rich in Chang'an or Bukhara. You are the man who walks. Your feet ache before the sun is up. You have no saddle, no seat atop the beasts. Those are reserved for cargo bales of silk wrapped in oilcloth, jars of dried dates, bundles of spices tied with twine. You walk, guiding the camels with hoarse grunts and clicks of the tongue, a switch in your hand to keep the slow ones moving. The wind comes early, a dry, whispering wind, pushing fine sand into your nostrils, your ears, the folds of your clothes. You wrap a strip of cloth across your face, but still, it finds a way in. Your skin never quite heals out here, all was sun-worn, chapped, and scratched from days of exposure. The camels are not graceful animals. They belch, they groan, they bite sometimes. They spit often. Their feet, broad and padded, move steadily, but not always willingly. If a beast goes lame, you'll have to redistribute its load. If it dies, you will bury it. If the sand is soft, or leave it for the vultures, if the ground is stone. Water is rationed carefully. Each morning, you take a small sip, just enough to wet your throat. Your share is measured in gourdfuls, not comfort. Sometimes, when you stop at a dried-up oasis, you dream of letting your whole face plunge into the well. But you don't. You can't. Your meals are basic. Flatbread baked in the coals days ago, dried meat so tough it flakes apart. If you're lucky, the cook, another man like you, another tired soul, boils something from barley and old fat. But out here, food is fuel, not pleasure. The days are endless and blinding. The sun rises behind you and climbs high overhead, casting no shadow. By afternoon, the sweat has dried to a crust of salt. Your eyes sting. The horizon never change, just dunes and rock and dunes. You might pass the bleached bones of another caravan. Camels, men. No one stops long to look, and then night falls. Suddenly the heat vanishes. The desert becomes a cold sea. You huddle close to the fire rift, there's fuel to burn in. Pull your wool cloak tighter. You listen to the camels grumble and shuffle. Check the knots on their lead ropes. You lie down on the hard earth. Your last thought before sleep is often of home, but home is so far you wonder if you remember it right. The stars above are cold and clear, a silent dome. The desert is quiet, save for the wind. So the rhythm of your life continues, step after step, day after day. There is no glory in your work, no poetry in tending camels. But without you, the great arteries of trade would stop. Silk would never cross the Taklamakan. Spices would never reach the bazaars. You are the footstep that supports an empire, and yet no one will remember your name. Now, as your eyes begin to grow heavier, we leave the desert path behind for now and follow another traveler, one with a mission far greater, but perhaps no less lonely. As the sun sinks low on the horizon of the Gobi, imagine yourself now in the imperial court of Han China, nearly 2,000 years ago. The air inside the hall is still, perfumed faintly with sandalwood and lacquer. Court officials speak in low tones. Scrolls are unfurled. Seated among them is a man whose name will echo through Chinese history, Zhang Qian. His mission? To travel beyond the familiar boundaries of the Han Empire, through deserts, mountains, and unknown lands, in search of allies and knowledge. His destination is a mystery. His journey will span decades. And his tale, while often glossed over in textbooks, is one of history's most quietly astonishing episodes of endurance, patience, and consequence. Zhang Qian was born in the 2nd century BCE. It's a time when the Han dynasty was establishing itself as a formidable force in East Asia. But even mighty, Han China was not immune to threats. To the north and west, the powerful Xiongnu Confederation of nomadic tribes raided and harried Chinese borders. Emperor Wu of Han, seeking a way to encircle or confront the Xiongnu, turned his gaze westward. Perhaps, the emperor thought, there were peoples and kingdoms beyond the deserts who shared this enmity, possible allies who could be reached. It was Zhang Qian, a mid-level court official, who was chosen to lead this unprecedented expedition. With a small entourage and a handful of guides, he departed in secret. Heading north and west toward lands largely unmapped and little understood by the Han court, he would become, in many ways, the first Chinese envoy to explore what would later be known as the Silk Road, but barely into his journey. Zhang Qian was captured by the Xiongnu. For over a decade, yes, more than 10 years, he was held under virtual house arrest in their territory. Imagine the slow erosion of hope. Day after day, season after season, years drifting by in a strange land among a nomadic people. His mission stalled, his return uncertain, the political winds back home in flux. And yet Zhang Qian remained determined. During this time, he married a Xiongnu woman and was allowed limited freedom. He observed their customs, their diplomacy, and their networks of trade and travel. And when the opportunity arose, he escaped on back to Han China, but onward westward to fulfill his original goal. His journey took him to the kingdom of Daiwan in the Fergana Valley, in what is now Uzbekistan. There, he encountered horses unlike any in China, tall, strong, and bred for endurance. He passed through Bactria, then under the rule of Greek-descended kings from the legacy of Alexander the Great. He met people who wore different robes, ate unfamiliar foods, and followed foreign gods. He heard stories of India to the south, Persia to the west, and the Roman world beyond. The diversity startled him. So many languages, so many terrains, so many civilizations, independent yet interconnected. Zhang Qian realized that China was not isolated, as many in the Han court believed. It was one node among many in a vast tapestry of people's goods and stories. Eventually, after many setbacks, skirmishes, and delays, he began the long journey home. By the time he returned to the Han court, nearly 13 years had passed. He had survived deserts, imprisonment, cultural barriers, and disease. He had failed to form a military alliance, but he brought something else: information. Detailed reports introduced the Chinese court to new territories, new trade possibilities, and new ambitions. His journey would open the imagination of the Han elite to lands filled with jade. Horses, spices, and fabrics, especially silk, which Chinese merchants would soon trade in vast quantities. The Silk Road, while not fully formed, was born in the steppes of Zhang Qian. Despite all he endured, Zhang Qian was sent out again by the emperor, this time with a larger party and official backing. His life remained a series of treks, setbacks, and diplomatic entanglements. And though little personal writing from him survives, his experiences shaped Chinese foreign policy and reshaped ancient trade routes forever. Through it all, Zhang Qian remained calm and steady, a figure of resolve in a world of uncertainty. His story is not one of thrilling battles or dramatic betrayals. It is instead the tale of a man walking, one step after another, through some of the most desolate and dazzling terrain on earth, with a message, a mission, and a mind full of questions. And so, from the hot winds of the desert to the cold passes of the Pamirs, we leave Zhang Qian for now. His footsteps linger in the sand, and his legacy in the archives of the Han. As night falls over the desert and the stars begin to emerge sharp and bright, above the black silence of the Gobi Way, shift our attention from the footsteps of one man to the remnants of entire cities. Cities that once teemed with life, trade, and belief. Cities now reduced to crumbling walls and forgotten names beneath drifting sands. Along the ancient veins of the Silk Road between China and the Middle East were dozens of oasis towns and desert settlements that served as way stations for weary caravans. Some were fortified trading hubs, others religious centers, and many were multicultural melting pots, where Persian, Chinese, Indian, and Central Asian customs intertwined. And yet, over time, many of these cities vanished, not with the violence of war, but quietly eroded by wind, abandoned as rivers shifted course, or simply swallowed by the desert. One such place is Nia, a lost city in the Tarim Basin of what is now Xinjiang, China. Once a thriving oasis settlement along the southern Silk Road route, Nia was home to traders, scribes, farmers, and monks. Its people wrote in scripts descended from Sanskrit and Greek. They built houses from wood and mud brick, irrigated fields, and worshipped in shrines decorated with colorful murals. When archaeologists rediscovered Nia in the 20th century, they were stunned by what they found: sealed rooms filled with everyday objects perfectly preserved by the dry climate. A wooden bed still intact. A wine cup resting beside a letter written in Kharosthi script. Sand had poured gently through broken ceilings, burying not just possessions, but fragments of human lives, swept floors, untended gardens, unfinished prayers. Another ghost on the Silk Road is the city of Lulan, once a flourishing kingdom that controlled vital crossroads in the Tarim Basin. Known to Chinese chroniclers as early as the 2nd century BCE, Lulan prospered from its control of water sources and trade routes, but by the 4th century CE, it was gone. Why, climate may have played the greatest role. The once flowing Lopner Lake nearby began to dry up. With no water, no city could survive. Lulan's people slowly abandoned it. By the time Chinese monks passed through the region centuries later, they reported only bones, shattered walls, and silence. Today Lulan is a haunting place. Archaeological teams must be airlifted in, as the landscape is too harsh to reach otherwise. What remains are the outlines of streets, the stumps of wooden houses, and the eerie presence of history frozen in mid-departure. Then there is Merv, a once great city in present-day Turkmenistan. Merv was not simply a Silk Road outpost, it was, for centuries, one of the largest cities in the world. Under various empires Achaemenid, Parthian, Sassanid, Seljuk became a center of learning, architecture, and spirituality. Its libraries rivaled those of Baghdad. Its mosques shimmered with turquoise domes. But Merv too was struck by a terrible fate. In 1221, the Mongol armies of Genghis Khan descended upon the city. After a brief siege, the gates opened. What followed was one of the most devastating massacres in medieval history. Over 700,000 people killed. Whether that number is exaggerated or not, the trauma left Merv depopulated and broken, never fully recovered. And while Merv's ruins are larger and more visible than those of Lulan or Nia, they are still silent. The winds whistle through crumbled madrasas and cracked minarets. The desert slowly encroaches. These cities and others like Dandanulik, Khotan, Gayoshan Green remind us that history does not move in a straight line. It shifts, it forgets, it buries and reburies. The Silk Road was never a single highway, it was a web, constantly changing, where cities could bloom for centuries and then disappear in a generation. For modern historians and archaeologists, each ruined city is like a sleepwalker's dream. They offer fleeting insights into ancient lives, what people wore, wrote, feared, traded, and hoped. But the full stories are often just out of reach. And so, as you rest deeper into calm, think of Nia's dusty scrolls, Lulan's dried wells, Merv's broken libraries. These were once full of voices, now they whisper in your imagination. Now that we've followed the blistered path of the camel tender, traced the rise of a great conqueror, and unearthed the ruins of forgotten cities, let us now turn to a world far removed from dust-choked thirst and aching limbs, a world gilded with silk, scented with sandalwood, and woven through with intrigue. Welcome to the life of a Silk Road merchant prince. not a king, not a general, but a man whose caravans stretched for miles, whose warehouses overflowed with wares from distant lands, and whose influence rivaled that of minor nobles. If you were such a figure, your life would begin not in the wilderness, but in a cosmopolitan city, perhaps in Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia. This city, cradled by mountains and steppe, was famed not only for its location, but for its dazzling culture, tiled domes, Persian poetry, and bazaars bursting with voices from every continent. You would rise early, before the sun hit the tiled courtyards of your compound. Servants brought spiced tea, while scribes updated the ledgers. Your household may be modest by palace standards, but not by common ones. There were likely artisans, tutors, guards, and perhaps even foreign retainers under your employ. A merchant prince did not carry his own goods. He coordinated, funded, and protected them. Your wealth was tied up in textiles from Chang'an, glassware from Alexandria, lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, and musk from Tibet. You negotiated in Persian, Sogdian, Chinese, and Turkic tongues, using translators when needed. And while most Silk Road trade did not involve direct long-distance travel, you might sponsor multiple stages owning camels in the desert, ships on the Persian Gulf, and shops in Bukhara. You had to navigate more than distance. There were taxes and bribes at every border, each city governed by a different regime. One day a local governor might waive duties in gratitude for a rare gift. The next, your entire caravan could be confiscated over a missing permit. Religion, too, was a currency. You might be Zoroastrian by heritage, Buddhist in practice, Muslim in public, and Nestorian Christian in secret, depending on the audience. Many merchant families maintained private shrines and public affiliations, balancing belief and diplomacy with the same care as their balance books. Yet life wasn't all risk. Rewards were lavish. Your dining room would be lined with painted tiles and embroidered cushions. You would host guests from India, Rome, and Arabia, all seated cross-legged on silk carpets, sipping fermented mare's milk or honeyed wine from ceramic goblets. Discussions would range from the rising price of cinnamon to rumors of dynastic collapse. Your children would be educated not only in mathematics and accounting, but in etiquette, calligraphy, and history. Daughters and sons alike were groomed to marry into powerful trading families, further extending your web of influence. If you lived in the Tang dynasty period, you might also find yourself summoned to court. The Chinese emperors relied on merchant envoys to assess frontier lands. You might dine in Chang'an's western quarter, a city district bursting with Persians, Sogdians, and Indian pilgrims. There, even the imperial palace whispered of foreign-influenced textiles from Central Asia, spices from Ceylon, horses from Fergana, but such wealth bred peril, rivals abounded. One missed shipment or poorly timed revolt could bankrupt you. There were whispers of poisoned incense, letters gone missing, and guides who betrayed their masters for coin. And if an empire fell, all your trade routes, permits, and protection vanished overnight. Still, if you managed to avoid such fates, old age brought prestige. You might retire to a cool estate on the edge of a city oasis, with gardens filled with fig trees, and orange blossoms, and a private library filled with ledgers of a life well-traveled, Devon, if only by proxy. There you'd listen to the bells of arriving caravans, smelling dust and cinnamon in the breeze, as grandchildren traced the same routes you once did. They'd know you not as a king, but as something equally powerful in the age of Commerce, man who moved the world not by sword, but by trade. And so, we close our journey for tonight. From the blistered trail of the camel tender to the campaigns of Akan to the buried cities beneath the dunes, and finally into the quiet luxury of a merchant's courtyard, the Silk Road unraveled its secrets before you one soft thread at a time. Imagine you're waking in darkness. The sun won't rise for another hour, and the fire in the hearth has long since turned to embers. The air inside the turf-roofed house is cold-biting, unmoving. You shift on your straw-stuffed mattress, wrapped in scratchy wool blankets, already aware of the chill awaiting your bare hands and feet. Outside, the wind howls in low, mournful tones. It moves through the gaps between stones, through slats in the fence, over the frozen mud paths that wind through the small village clinging to the edge of a fjord. The roofs are hunched under a thin layer of frost, and the nets, coiled and stiff, are waiting where you left them by the shed, crusted with salt. You rise. There's little time for comfort. It's a quick bite of cold barley bread. Maybe a sip of thin ale. The sea waits for no one. Pulling on your thick tunic, woven from coarsely spun wool, you prepare for the day. Your boots are stuffed with straw, barely enough to keep out the cold. The leather is stiff and worn. Outside, your fingers begin to numb as you gather your gear. Nets, creels, ropes, hooks, the tools of your life. The sea is close, but always dangerous. Reaching it means navigating slippery rocks, thick patches of seaweed, and the unpredictable crash of waves. Today, like most days, you fish from a simple wooden boat, barely the length of 3 men. Hewn from local timber and patched with care, it rocks slightly as you and your companions board. Pushing off into the icy water with short, practiced strokes, your arms ache quickly. The oars are heavy, the current strong, but there's no other way. The sea is your livelihood, your pantry, your burden. Cod, herring, maybe flounder if you're lucky. The catch is uncertain. What in the day of success might mean the difference between a full belly and a night of gnawing hunger? Hauling the nets is a slow, back-breaking task. Your hands, already sore from rowing, grow raw and red. The salt water stings every cut and crack. Fish writhe and flop in the bottom of the boat's maw, glinting prizes, but the work is far from over. Gutting, sorting, salting, it must all be done before the return trip. There's little time to think, just a constant rhythm of labor. Back on shore, the sun lingers low in the sky. The days are short this far north. Women and children wait by the drying rack's wooden frames built to hold fish, stiff as boards, strung in rows like wind chimes of survival. The smell is heavy, earthy, and briny. It sticks to your clothes, your skin, your hair. It never leaves. Later, you help mend the nets, weaving new lines into the frayed ones, fingers working numbly by the fading light. Dinner is simple fish, again, boiled with onions and coarse grains, served with a hard heel of bread. The fire flickers weakly. You sit close to it, soaking in what warmth you can. The home is quiet now, a low murmur of conversation. The occasional cough, a baby whimpering softly in the dark. The walls are made of stacked stone and timber, packed with turf to keep out the worst of the cold, but the wind still finds its way in. You sleep early. You must. The sea calls again tomorrow, and the rhythm will continue. There is no luxury here, only the slow grind of necessity. This is life in a Viking fishing village. It's brutal in its simplicity, demanding in every way. The community survives not through strength alone, but through unending endurance, passed from one frostbitten generation to the next. But now, let us leave the salt-stiff nets and the wind-blown boats behind. Ahead lies a different story, a tale, not of common hardship, but of quiet ambition on the open sea. Let us now leave behind the briny shallows and salted nets of the fishing village. The rhythm of the oars, the thump of fish against hulls, and the rasp of ice-cold wind on sea-worn faces fades into the distance. Drift now into another story, one set not along the familiar fjords of home, but across the great uncertain sea. Tonight we recount the journey of a quiet yet determined man, remembered in scattered sagas and whispered across the long winters. Leif Erikson. His name lingers in the northern wind, and though history remembers him chiefly for reaching the shores of a new land, Vinland, his tale begins. Like many Norse stories, in the long shadow of family, Leif was the son of Eric the Red, a bold and fiery man known as much for his temper as his tenacity. Eric had founded the first Norse settlements in Greenland. After being exiled from Iceland, Leif was born into that windswept land of rock and moss, ice and fjord, raised in one of Greenland's small Norse enclaves. His childhood would have been one of long winters, tight-knit communities, and the stories of the old country passed down by firelight. His mother, Theodohild, a Christian, shaped another part of his early life, one that set Leif apart from his father and many of his peers. While Eric clung to the Old Norse gods, Leif was drawn toward the new teachings spreading from the south, whispering of a single god, peace, and redemption. In time, these spiritual leanings would take him far from home. But first, he journeyed to Norway, leaving behind Greenland's icy coasts to sail east across the unpredictable North Atlantic. His destination was the court of King Olaf Tryggvason in Trondheim, a place pulsing with ambition and restless energy. It was there, amid the clang of iron and the chanting of priests, that Leif converted to Christianity. King Olaf, ever eager to spread the new faith, entrusted Leif with the mission of bringing Christianity to Greenland. But fate had another path in store before he returned. As the sagas tell it, Leif heard rumors, perhaps from a merchant, perhaps from a mariner, of a land further west. A place where the trees grew tall, the soil was soft, and the pastures were green. Some claimed that a man named Biodny had already glimpsed it driven off course in a storm. He had seen strange shores, but had never set foot upon them. Leif, methodical and measured, resolved to find this place. He outfitted a ship, gathered a crew, and set sail westward from Greenland. The sea was vast and temperamental. The wind could vanish for days, then return with a vengeance. But the ship, a sturdy Nair, moved ever westward under his careful guidance. The journey is thought to have brought him to a sequence of new lands. First, a rocky and barren coast, which he called Hellu Land, perhaps modern-day Baffin Island. Then, a forested place he named Markland, likely Labrador. And finally, Vinland, the land of meadows and vines, widely believed today to correspond to parts of Newfoundland. Vinland was different. The winters were gentler. Wild grapes were said to grow, and fish filled the rivers. Leif and his men built shelters and wintered there. They felled trees, dried fish, and explored the land. Though they would not stay for long, perhaps only one winter, the memory of that green land would linger in Norse imagination. And yet there was no grand conquest, no bloody battles, no colonization as later empires would attempt. Leif did not remain in Vinland, nor did he return with gold or treasures. His voyage, quiet and cautious, marked the first known European landing in North America centuries before Columbus. After returning to Greenland, Leif carried out the mission King Olaf had given him. He helped spread Christianity among the Norse settlers, building a small church for his mother. He would come to be known not just as an explorer, but also as Leif the Lucky. The name, perhaps, was earned not through riches or victory, but through his survival and quiet success. There is little more recorded of Leif's later years, no dramatic final voyage, no saga-worthy death, simply fades from the pages of history. His presence lingering in the wood smoke of memory like footprints washed smooth by the tide. And so his story rests, not with the clang of swords or the roar of conquest, but with the soft creak of oarlocks and the slow breath of wind in the sails. He crossed a sea others had only feared, and found a world untouched by Norse feet. In the quiet of night, drifting half between sleep and waking, you can imagine that journey, the sway of the deck, the endless line of gray sea and sky, and Leif standing silent at the prow, eyes fixed westward. Now let us drift further still beyond the known voyages of Leif Erikson. Beyond the edge of the sagas, into the cold silence of Greenland's southern fjords. Here, tucked between icy cliffs and windswept meadows, the Norse carved out a life for nearly 500 years. And then they vanished. Tonight, in this deep, unhurried part of our journey, we will explore one of history's quietest disappearances. There were no battles, no plagues, no fires or sudden catastrophes, just the slow fading of voices in the frost. We return to Greenland, not as it was at its hopeful founding, but as it stood centuries later, worn, weathered, and haunted by absence. The Norse settlements in Greenland began around the year 985, when Eric the Red led a fleet of ships from Iceland to this vast, empty land, gave it a hopeful name. Greenland, perhaps to attract more settlers, perhaps in irony. What they found was a land of extreme short summers, long winters, and just enough grass for sheep and goats to graze. There were two main settlements: the eastern settlement near modern-day Kakart, and the western settlement, located hundreds of miles to the northwest. At their height, these communities may have numbered around 3,000 peoples, small, tight-knit, and fiercely reliant on one another. They built turf houses with thick walls and tiny windows. They kept livestock, hunted seals, and traded with both Europe and the nearby Inuit communities. Life was harsh, but structured. Churches were built, some ornately decorated, and the Norse even established a bishopric. Written records from Iceland and Norway mention Greenland regularly. For centuries it was part of the known world, but then the mentions stop, letters go unanswered. Trade slows. Eventually, ships from Iceland that attempt to visit find only silence. The Western settlement disappears first, around the mid-14th century. The Eastern settlement lingers longer until the early 1400s, and then nothing. What happened? There is no single answer, but many overlapping threads. Let us follow them slowly. Climate may have played a central role. The period from the 14th to 19th centuries is now known as the Little Ice Age of time, when global temperatures dropped and growing seasons shortened. For the Greenland Norse, already pushing the limits of sustainable agriculture, this meant colder winters, more ice-choked fjords, and less grass for their animals. Isolation grew more acute. As Europe turned its attention to the Black Death and the 100 Years' War, Greenland faded from its priorities. Trade diminished. The Norse settlers had relied on imported iron, timber, and grains. Without it, tools broke, buildings rotted, and food supplies thinned. The Inuit, who had long lived in the Arctic and were better adapted to its challenges, began to thrive just as the Norse declined. Some theories suggest tensions arose, others point to potential cooperation. But the Norse, it seems, never fully adopted Inuit technologies like the kayak, the toggle harpoon, or the seal oil lamp. They remained culturally Norse, even as their environment demanded adaptation. There are also clues in the archaeology, quiet ones. In excavated homes, bones shift over time from cattle and sheep to seal and fish. Churches, once richly adorned, show signs of neglect. Graves become fewer and shallower. The final written record we have is from 1408, a wedding held in the church at HVLC. After that, there is only silence. Did they die out slowly one harsh winter at a time? Did the last families abandon their turf houses, sailing south in search of better lands? Or did they simply fade into the landscape, their memory buried under snowdrifts and lichen? What's striking is the absence of trauma. No signs of fire, no mass graves, no violent end. It was as if the settlement simply exhaled and never breathed in again. And so, archaeologists today walk among the mossy ruins, tracing outlines of long houses and churches. They sift through whale bones and soapstone, searching for stories in the stillness. The wind still moves through empty doorways. The fjords remain deep and cold. Perhaps it is fitting that the Norse Greenlanders left so quietly. Their life was one of endurance, of holding fast against the odds, year after year. When they could endure no longer, they simply let go. As we float gently through their vanished world, we are reminded of how fragile even the most resilient communities can be, how silence can speak volumes, how the land reclaims its own. Imagine now a world of flickering firelight and heavy wooden beams, where smoke curls slowly toward the dark rafters, and the scent of burning peat fills the air. We step inside the longhouse of a Viking jarl, the local noble, a man of wealth, power, and respect in this rugged northern land. Here the rhythms of life are different from the hard toil by the sea. The longhouse stands tall and wide, built of timber and stone, its walls thick against the cold winds. Inside, the space is alive with warmth. A large central hearth glows steadily, surrounded by benches where men, women, and children gather at the close of day. The flicker of flames casts gentle shadows on walls, adorned with carved walrus ivory and tapestries woven from wool, dyed in deep, earthy tones. Imagine yourself reclining on a cushioned bench, a wooden bowl of thin but hearty stew resting in your hands. The rich aroma of salted fish mingles with the sharp tang of dried herbs and the faint sweetness of honeyed mead. The sound of a lyre or a harp hums softly in the background as a scald storyteller and poet begins a quiet tale, weaving ancient legends and heroic deeds into the night air. Unlike the restless toil of the fishing village, here is a world of ceremony and social ritual. The Jarl's household is a small court. His retainers, warriors sworn to his protection, drink and exchange quiet conversations. Women tend to the fires and serve food, their movements practiced and deliberate, while children sit close to their mothers, absorbing the warmth and tales that knit the community together. Mead flows steadily, warmed by the fire. The Jarl himself sits near the hearth, wrapped in a cloak of soft dyed wool, his hands steady as he listens. His carved drinking horn is filled with rich, amber liquid, a symbol of both hospitality and power. Around him, alliances are forged not through grand gestures, but through whispered words, thoughtful glances, and carefully chosen gifts. The Longhouse is also a place of politics. Though the Jarl's authority is respected, it is not absolute. His men and kin weigh his decisions. Matters of land, disputes between neighbors, the division of spoils from recent raids are all discussed here, beneath the low, smoke-darkened beams. The rhythm of these gatherings is steady and measured, the voices calm but firm. Outside, the cold presses in, the wind rattling loose shingles and making the torches flicker. Inside, the fire's warmth wraps around you like a heavy blanket, a refuge from the wildness beyond. The Longhouse is more than a home, it is a sanctuary, a stage, a fortress. As you settle deeper into this quiet world, imagine the carved ivory gleaming softly in the firelight, the faint scent of pine resin on polished wooden surfaces, and the gentle murmur of voices rising and falling in the dim warmth. Here, among the Jarl and his court, you can feel the steady pulse of a society both harsh and refined, shaped by the land and sea, by tradition and survival. It is a world apart from the fishing village, yet connected by the same relentless northern winds and the same enduring human spirit. Imagine yourself waking before the sun. The air is thin, sharp, and still. Outside your simple stone home, the light is just beginning to wash the sky in dusky grays and pale pinks. A cold breath seeps through the cracks in the thatch. Your body, accustomed to it, moves steadily through the morning routine. You live at over 11,000 feet above sea level, in the shadow of mountains that rise even higher. This is the Andean highland, a world shaped by slope and elevation, where every terrace is a battle won from nature. Farming here is not easy, never has been, but it is possible. For generations, it has been your way of life. Your family tends to narrow, earthen terraces carved into the hillside Indians, as they are known. Each one held in place by stacked stone retaining walls, catch the sunlight just so, and allow you to plant on what would otherwise be sheer, rocky slopes. Some terraces are centuries old, and you work them with reverence, repairing them carefully after each rainy season. The soil is dark and fertile, mixed with layers of organic matter and gravel to help with drainage. You use no plow, only a simple foot plower. Chalky tackle pushed into the earth with your weight and the strength of your arms. Your rhythm is slow and steady, marked by breaths, by muscle memory, by the dull thump of tool into soil. You grow potatoes. Dozens of varieties, some waxy, some dry, some small and purple, others large and golden. Potatoes are life here. You also cultivate quinoa, maize, where the climate allows, and root crops like oca and mashua. The planting calendar is guided by the stars and the moon. Your ancestors watched the sky with care, and their wisdom is passed down in stories. You might begin planting after the Pleiades reappear in the night sky, or wait for the waxing moon to promise strong, upward-growing crops. Water is precious. From the snow-caps above, meltwater travels down through Kanit's underground aqueducts and amunas. Stone channels carved with astonishing precision help tend to these, clearing debris, guiding water where it's needed. Irrigation is communal. The canals don't belong to you, but to the village. Everything is done with the Alu and mind your extended kin group, your social and economic community. Your day moves in concert with the land. Mid-morning, the sun warms the terraces, and you shed the woolen shawl that shielded you earlier. The smell of soil and dry stone fills your nostrils. Nearby, your younger sibling watches over the llamas, which graze lazily on the hillside. Llamas carry your harvest, your tools, and when needed, your family. They are not ridden, but they are essential. By midday, your hands are dusted with earth. You eat a small meal, perhaps chuno. Freeze-dried potatoes soaked and rehydrated in a simple stew, or a handful of roasted maize and a few bites of dried meat. The flavors are salty, bitter, nutty, rich in their own right. In the afternoon, you help gather kindling and tend the home. The house is made of stone and packed earth, with thick walls that hold warmth. Inside, a small hearth smolders with smoke that lingers and clings to every woven cloth. You sit for a moment, mending a woolen sash, fingers used to the coarse, twisted fibers of alpaca yarn. Then perhaps you help your mother at the loom. She weaves with a backstrap loom, seated on the floor, creating patterns that tell stories zigzags. Step shapes, symbols of water and sky. You know these patterns as you know the hills, not by instruction, but through endless, gentle exposure. Evening comes suddenly in the mountains. Sun drops behind a ridge and the air cools sharply. Chickens cluck softly in their pens. Light a torch and close the wooden door. Dinner is quiet. The family eats together. Your father speaks little. He listens to the wind as if it's telling him something important. Tonight, like most nights, you sleep on a mat of woven reeds, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. You close your eyes to the sounds of insects, the occasional distant howl of a dog, the soft breathing of your siblings. And above it all, the mountains watch silently. Their peaks are sacred, each one a living spirit Awaka. You do not climb them needlessly. You honor them with offerings of coca leaves and chicha. You live in balance with them, farming the land they allow you to use. It is not an easy life, but it is a whole one. It's full of cycles and purpose, deeply connected to soil, to sky, to season, and to community. With that, the day ends. A day like so many before it, day shaped by stone, sun, and patience. Let us now gently leave behind the potato fields, the clinking of hand tools, and the slow breath of llamas high on the terraces, and turn our attention to the rise of one of the most influential leaders in South American history, Pachacati, the emperor who would expand a modest highland kingdom into the vast and efficient Inca Empire. In the calm, cool air of the Andean highlands, in the city of Cusco, then a relatively small and regional center life had a rhythm of its own. Stone walls echoed with the voices of traders, weavers, and priests. Yet even here in a place steeped in tradition, the winds of change began to stir. Pachacati, whose name can be translated as Earthshaker, or he who overturns space and time, was not originally destined for greatness. He was the son of the Inca ruler Viracocha, one among many sons, and not the obvious heir. But in times of uncertainty, the path to leadership can shift. Around the year 1438, Cusco came under threat from a rival group, the Chanca. As the invasion neared, many in the royal family, including Viracocha himself, chose to flee. But young Pachacati, still called Cusiopanqui at the time, chose to stay behind. He quietly organized the defense of the city, rallying warriors and forging alliances. The battles that followed were intense and exhausting, but Cusco held. In the aftermath, Pachacati claimed the throne not merely as a war hero, but as a transformative leader. Now imagine yourself walking behind him in those early years, perhaps as a servant, or a young scribe, watching the gears of empire begin to turn. He was not only a military tactician, but also a masterful organizer. Under his command, the Inca state transformed into Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters, divided into carefully governed regions radiating from Cusco like spokes from a wheel. Roads stretched across mountains and valleys, linked by rope bridges and stone markers. Messengers known as chasqui ran tirelessly along them, carrying records knotted into colorful quipu cords. Pachacati oversaw not just expansion, but integration, bringing diverse Andean peoples into the fold, respecting local customs while establishing a centralized state. And still, he built. In his reign, Cusco was reshaped into a ceremonial marvel. Designed in the shape of a pumit's claws, tail and heart made real through architecture. The great fortress rose above the city with its immense zigzagging walls of interlocked stone, each block carefully hewn to fit without mortar, locked tight like a puzzle. Pachacati also ordered the construction of an estate far removed, perched along a dramatic mountain ridge. You might know it now as Machu Picchu, though it would be centuries before the world at large learned its name. Built as a royal retreat, it was a place of quiet thought, of ritual, and perhaps rest. A mirror to the sky itself, where the stars seemed to linger just above the terraces. Through all this, Pachacati ruled not as a distant emperor, but as a divine figure, the Sapa Inca, the unique son of Inti, the sun god. His every decision echoed with cosmic significance. In ceremonies, golden rays glinted from his garments. In public, he spoke little, but his gaze was law. Around him, the empire blossomed. Yet empires are always a balance of force and diplomacy, of vision and fragility. Even as Pachacati expanded the Inca domain, he ensured the loyalty of nobles and administrators through a complex system of gift-giving, marriage alliances, and ancestral reverence. The dead emperors of old were honored with offerings, and Pachacati himself likely began planning his own cult, his future resting place, the lands and retainers that would support it long after his earthly life had ended. As we gently leave this chapter of strategy and stone, let the rhythms of empire fade softly behind us. The beat of marching feet along mountain roads, the quiet shuffling of records into Quipu, nots the muffled chants of priests in the Temple of the Sun. Next, we will turn our gaze even further back beyond the Inca, beyond their roads and palaces too. The southern desert where great lines stretch across the ground, so vast they can only be truly seen from the sky. A mystery carved into the very earth. As we descend gently from the mountains of the Inca into the low, arid deserts of southern Peru, the air becomes stiller, the sky wider, and the landscape quieter. Here, the silence is not just absence, but ancient. It feels as though time rests lightly on the land, whispering only when the wind brushes across the sand. Stretching across this quiet plain are enormous shapes, sprawling geoglyphs, etched into the crust of the desert. Cannot see them clearly from the ground. They are too vast. But from the sky, or perhaps from a nearby foothill, you might begin to make out the forms. A monkey with a spiraling tail. A spider with long, even legs. A hummingbird, a condor, and dozens of long, ruler-straight lines that slice through the landscape like invisible paths to the horizon. These are the Nazca lines created between 500 BCE and 500 CE by the Nazca culture and their ancestors. Their purpose, still debated. Their meaning, still elusive. But their presence is unquestionable, and strangely calming in its precision and quiet grandeur. Imagine yourself as a member of the Nazca people, perhaps a ritual assistant or a worker tasked with sweeping the stones clear to expose the pale earth beneath. The work is slow, deliberate. Carry baskets of dark surface rocks, remove them in neat rows, and slowly, the light earth below reveals itself like a canvas. You are told you are part of something sacred, something larger than you will ever fully see, and that is true. You never will see the whole monkey or the soaring bird. You may only walk its outline, understand its curves and the shape of your footfall. Yet you feel that it matters, that the act of creating it, of preserving it, is itself a form of connection. Perhaps to the gods above or to spirits who see what you cannot. Some researchers believe these lines were tied to ritual pilgrimage routes, places where people walked in silent reverence. Following the lines during seasonal ceremonies in honor of water and fertility, others suggest astronomical alignments, pointing to solstice sunrises or celestial events. Still others see the figures as symbols of myth, of cosmic animals, or offerings to deities watching from above. While the lines are most famous, they are not the only marvels the Nazca left behind. The region is also home to ancient Puquio's ingenious spiral-shaped wells and aqueducts dug deep into the ground. They harnessed underground aquifers and made it possible for agriculture to flourish in this unforgiving terrain. You might walk along one of these spirals, feeling the cool air rise from the stone channels as water flows silently below. The Nazca were not isolated artists or mystics. They were part of a broader cultural lineage. Before them, the Paracas culture flourished, known for its intricate textiles, stunning in color and complexity, and for elaborate burial practices that included mummification and ancestor reverence. The mummies of the desert, with their intricate wrappings and peaceful postures, remind us that these people saw life and death as part of a continuous thread. Indeed, in some places you might stumble upon what appear to be bundles of cloth, sun-bleached and half-buried in sand. But inside those bundles are the curled forms of ancient dead preserved by the dry air, still keeping their silent vigil beneath the desert sky. The mystery of the Nazca lines endures, because it was never meant to be fully understood in modern terms. Their meaning may have been woven into oral traditions, seasonal rites, and a cosmology that no longer lives in spoken words. But even now, they evoke stillness, awe, and contemplation. So let the wind of the desert lull you now, Let the distant bird-shaped outlines settle in your imagination, and feel the comfort of knowing that some mysteries are meant to be watched, not solved. Now let us gently return to the highlands, to the lofty mountain city of Cusco, the very navel of the Inca world. Here in this carefully planned city of stone and symmetry, the empire radiates out in all directions. It is a place of order and ceremony, where every wall speaks of power, every plaza of purpose, and nestled within its finely crafted streets are the homes compounds, really of Inca nobles. Imagine you are standing before the entrance of one of these noble residences. From the outside, the building appears understated but solid, with stonework so precise you can hardly slide a blade of grass between the fitted blocks. The entrance is trapezoidal, a shape found throughout Inca architecture, believed to lend resilience in the face of earthquakes. You step inside, and the sounds of the bustling city fade behind thick stone walls. The courtyard opens before you, rectangular and tidy, surrounded by one-story structures built with the same seamless masonry. The air is thinner here in Cusco's altitude, but filled with the soft sense of woven wool, earthen floors, and sweet corn chicha. Life here is organized, even ceremonial. You are among the elite now members of royal lineages, high priests, seasoned generals, and administrators overseeing vast stretches of empire. These nobles rarely labor with their hands. Their days are shaped by ritual, by duty, by the rhythms of imperial governance. Inside the rooms of the compound, floors are often lined with woolen rugs or soft hides. Walls might be adorned with fine textiles, combi-woven with incredible skill, and reserved only for the upper classes. These fabrics are not merely decorative. They're political gifts, ritual garments, symbols of rank. Each one is a tapestry of meaning, dyed with cochineal red, indigo blue, and earth tones drawn from local plants and minerals. In the storage rooms, you might find ceramic jars filled with dried potatoes, chuno, and freeze-dried meats, stored for both household use and ritual offerings. There are gold and silver vessels, too, shaped into llamas or maize stalks, though these are brought out only on rare occasions. The meals here are more varied than among common farmers, but still centered on maize. Potatoes, beans, and roasted guinea pig, served with careful ceremony. Guests are often offered chicha de jora, a fermented corn beer, poured into decorated cups called carros. The act of sharing a drink is never casual. It is a gesture of alliance, trust, and obligation. Festivals mark the calendar, many tied to the sun's movements. The most important is Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. On this day, nobles don bright feathered garments and gold adornments, and join the Sapa Inca in elaborate rituals. You might be summoned to watch or participate, carrying offerings or performing ritual steps to honor Inti, the sun god who sustains all life in the Andes. Outside the walls of the compound, you hear the echo of drums and panpipes drifting from the ceremonial plaza. Dancers with sweeping capes made of macaw feathers whirl in slow, deliberate steps, their movements recalling sacred myths. The noble residents often observe from shaded balconies, their roles both participatory and supervisory, guiding but rarely mingling with the common people. And yet this life of refinement is not idle. Nobles are expected to be educated in oral tradition, astronomy, military strategy, and statecraft. They manage labor quotas under the Midas system, oversee religious temples, and serve as governors across the sprawling empire. Their children are trained from a young age to embody the ideals of a Lucan-based reciprocity and loyalty to the empire. Within the compound, life feels controlled, almost hushed. Stone keeps out the cold and the noise. Servants move with quiet efficiency, some preparing ritual offerings, others spinning yarn or grinding maize. In one corner, a priest traces patterns in a bed of ashes, preparing for an auguria ritual to interpret divine will through the behavior of flames or the movement of sacred coca leaves. Night falls slowly in Cusco. As stars begin to pierce the sky, the city transforms into a tapestry of flickering fires and quiet voices. From the compound's rooftop, you might gaze upward at the Milky Way, which the Inca saw as a celestial river. Its dark spaces were just as meaningful as its bright ones, home to sky animals, spirit guides, and ancestral memories. Imagine waking up in darkness, not the comforting stillness of your bedroom at night, but a silence broken only by the scrape of sand outside your small mud brick sleeping chamber. Your mat is thin, Your bones are tired. You rise before the sun dares show its face over the Nile. Because the pharaoh's courtyard must be swept, his sandals prepared, his morning basin filled with fresh water, drawn from a cistern cooled by the night air. You are one of many, not enslaved, but not quite free. You live where you work, perhaps in the servant quarters of a sprawling palace in Thebes, or tucked behind one of the vast estate houses that line the sacred path to Karnak. Your workday is long, your tasks unending. Your reward is food, shelter, and the unspoken expectation that you will never displease. The first task each morning? Water, always water. The Nile is near, but the water for the palace must be filtered, cooled, and scented. You carry it in ceramic jars balanced on a worn wooden yoke over your shoulders, careful not to let it slosh or cloud with sediment. Inside the palace, limestone floors must be scrubbed with reeds and sandan. Endless cycle, as foot traffic from priests, officials, and visiting dignitaries tracks in dust and debris. The scent of crushed lotus petals clings faintly to the walls, but the tang of sweat and mildew lingers beneath. When the pharaoh walks, the halls must shine. When he wakes, his linens must be crisp, and his chamber must be free of noise. You move in silence. No sandals, bare feet only, always, so as not to disturb him. If you speak, it is in whispers. If you breathe too loudly, someone will notice. The air is hot by mid-morning, and you are already drenched in perspiration. Your tunic, once white, clings to your skin. You have no shade, no pause. If you're assigned to the outer courtyards, you might be raking the decorative gravel into perfect patterns, or cleaning the hooves of sacred animals in preparation for ritual. The flies are relentless, the sun unyielding. Meals are simple. Bread and beer mostly. Lentils, onions, a smear of goat cheese if you're lucky. You eat quickly under an awning, perhaps in a corner of the courtyard. You sit on a crate, or on the packed earth itself. You do not eat with those you serve. Your hands smell of oil and lime and animal fat. Some days you serve in the temple wing of the palace, washing statues, lighting incense, preparing offerings for the gods that the pharaoh himself communes with. You must purify yourself before entering. This means ritual washing, shaving body hair, and silence. Always silence. You've seen beatings. Never for disobedience, only for delay. Slowness is punished more than error. There is no time to be tired, and yet everyone is tired. You know your place, you will never rise beyond it. There is pride, too, in doing your tasks with care. In the slow art of folding linen just so. In the flick of the wrist that polishes gold without smudging it. In the careful angle at which you pour scented water into the pharaoh's copper bowl, never splashing, never rushing. Sometimes during festivals, you glimpse the celebration from afar, bright linen robes, music drifting through open colonnades. But you will never be invited to dance or drink. You are the one who fetches the drink. Who folds the robes? Who clears the cups when the music fades? And yet, this too is life. This is your world, your routine, your burden. By nightfall, your knees ache from scrubbing. Your back aches from lifting. You curl again on your mat, beneath a low ceiling of mud brick, and drift into shallow sleep. Tomorrow will begin again, before the sun, before the noise. And your hands will once again serve the god-king of Egypt, unseen. Let us now drift further down the Nile, away from the clamor of daily toil, and into the peculiar world of one of Egypt's most enigmatic rulers. You are now in the presence not of a laborer but of a pharaoh who dared to reshape Egypt's spiritual foundation. His name was Akhenaten, and his reign was as puzzling as it was transformative. Before Akhenaten, Egypt's gods were many. They filled temples and festivals, tombs and incantations. But during Akhenaten's rule in the 14th century BCE, the very fabric of divine order was altered. He did not simply promote a new deity. He attempted to erase the old ones. Akhenaten's god was Atona Sundisk, radiant and singular. No longer would prayers be directed to Osiris, Isis, or Amon. Now the warmth of the sun itself, depicted as golden rays ending in hands, was the sole source of life, and the pharaoh himself was the conduit. Imagine waking each day to a world where the divine had been narrowed to a single celestial body, its cult enforced with imperial will. Even his name was changed. He had once been known as Amenhotep IV, a name honoring Amun. But with his spiritual revolution, he became Akhenaten, effective for the Atan. In doing so, he began one of the most radical and short-lived religious reforms in ancient history. He did not stop at theology. Akhenaten ordered the construction of a new capital city, built from scratch on virgin land, Akhenaten known today as Amarna. Imagine, if you will, an entire city springing up along the desert-est edge, temples open to the sky to welcome the rays of Aten. Wide avenues devoid of the towering stone sanctuaries of traditional Egyptian worship. The architectural style was softer, more naturalistic. In the art of the time, even the royal family is depicted with elongated limbs, rounded bellies, and expressive faces. Gone was the rigid grandeur of earlier dynasties, replaced by something more intimate, perhaps more human. It was in this strange oasis that Akhenaten ruled. Its Queen Nefertiti stood by his side, powerful in her own right, resplendent in art and ceremony. Together, they presented a vision of a royal family under the sun, basking in its life-giving warmth. They bore daughters and posed in scenes of domestic tenderness, a notable shift from the distant, stoic pharaohs of old. What while the sunlight streamed across Akhenaten's whitewashed walls, elsewhere the shadows grew. The priesthood of Amun, once immensely powerful, had been stripped of its influence. Many would have watched the Atenist revolution with resentment. Traditionalists, both elite and common, struggled to adjust. Egypt's old gods had shaped daily life and death for generations. Banishing them left a spiritual void. And then there was the economy. Resources poured into building Akhenaten, the maintenance of a new religious bureaucracy. And the abandonment of established centers like Thebes all created strain. Some regions of Egypt suffered neglect, foreign threats grew more aggressive, and the empire's stability began to fray. After 17 years of rule, Akhenaten died, and with his death came the rapid unraveling of his vision. His successor, a boy king known later as Tutankhamun, reinstated the old gods and returned power to the temples. Akhenaten was abandoned, left to crumble under wind and sand. The name of Akhenaten was chiseled out from monuments, erased from lists of kings, and omitted from official histories. It was as though Egypt had tried to forget the sunlight had ever pointed only in one direction, and yet the remnants remain. Clay tablets from the city's archives, broken statues with almond eyes, hymn fragments praising the Aten echoed the reign of a man who tried to rewrite the heavens. As we leave Akhenaten behind, imagine the ghostly quiet of its broad streets, the abandoned courtyards once warmed by worship, and the distant hum of the old gods returning to power. Now, let us descend from the airy halls of royalty and turn our gaze toward a place much more hidden, a village not of kings, but of those who carved their eternal dreams into stone. Imagine yourself waking to the dull gray light before sunrise, in a place unlike any other in Egypt. This is not a temple or a palace, but a secluded desert village tucked into a valley of stone. You're in Deir el-Medina, the workers' village home to the artisans, stonecutters, painters, and scribes who crafted the very tombs of the pharaohs. This was no ordinary community. It was built for a singular purpose, to house the men and families responsible for the royal necropolis, the tombs. Hidden away in the Valley of the Kings, the village, surrounded by walls and removed from the general population, was isolated by design. Secrets were its currency. For here, in these narrow lanes and modest mud brick homes, lived the only people allowed to know where Egypt's greatest treasures were buried. The villagers were skilled laborers, state employees, members of a rare class, neither peasant nor priest, but something in between. They worked on rotating schedules, 8 days on, 2 days off. Their job? To chisel corridors through limestone, decorate burial chambers with dazzling scenes from the afterlife, and prepare the eternal resting places of gods on earth. Your workday begins in the dark, climbing the rocky path from the village to the tomb site. You carry simple tools, copper chisels, reed brushes, bags of plaster. A scribe records your attendance in the daily journal, a remarkable set of documents preserved to this day, offering insight into ancient HR management. If you are absent, the reason is noted: sick, drunk, bitten by a scorpion, sometimes even mourning the cat. Inside the tomb, the work is meticulous. The walls are sketched, then plastered, then painted with sacred texts and ritual scenes. Gods like Anubis and Osiris guide the deceased through the perilous journey of the Duetha Egyptian underworld.
Oh.
Every curve of the hieroglyph, every hue of blue or gold has meaning. A misplaced stroke could misguide a pharaoh's soul for eternity. Back in the village, life is modest but structured. Your house is long and narrow, 2 or 3 rooms with a cooking pit, storage jars, and perhaps a roof area for sleeping on cool nights. The community is tight-knit. Gossip travels fast. Marriage, festivals, and small legal disputes are all recorded in ostraka shards of pottery used like sticky notes for scribes. Disagreements might be brought before the foreman or village council, often in the form of a carefully composed petition. And yet, despite the order, Deir el-Medina was not immune to strife. We have records of the world's first known labor strike when workers stopped carving a tomb because their grain rations were late. They marched to the necropolis entrance and demanded to be heard, not with weapons, but with words and presence. Their grievances were recorded, not silenced. The community endured for over 4 centuries. But as dynasties rose and fell, tombs were looted. Egypt's imperial power weakened. The workers were eventually disbanded. The village was abandoned, its residents forgotten. It wasn't until the 20th century that archaeologists rediscovered this remarkable place. Thousands of ostraka were found in garbage dumps and buried storeroom scraps of daily life, shopping lists, love letters, laundry bills, and even school exercises. Through these fragments, the voices of the tomb builders returned to us, preserved across millennia. Today, when we look at the splendor of tombs like those of Seti I or Tutankhamun, we see only the finished marvel. But in Deir el-Medina, we find the brushstrokes, the muscle aches, the arguments and joys of the humans who built those wonders, ordinary people, making something meant to last forever. As evening falls and the desert winds hush, we step out of the humble worker's village and into a realm of unimaginable contrast, the lavish homes and perfumed courtyards of ancient Egypt's elite. Here, everything slows even further. Life is not about toil, but about ritual, refinement, and reputation. Imagine now that you are no longer a laborer in Deir el-Medina, but a high-ranking noble or priest in the capital city of Thebes during the New Kingdom. Your home is not mud brick, but limestone, adorned with painted columns, decorated thresholds, and wide courtyards shaded by sycamore and date palms. The air carries the scent of myrrh, cedar wood, oil, and incense, constantly burned to purify and please the gods and yourself. Your linen robes are freshly laundered by household attendants. Your head is shaved smooth and dusted with fragrant cone-shaped wax perfumes that melt gently over your skin throughout the day, while musicians pluck lutes and young dancers perform beneath hanging garlands of blue lotus. Food for you is abundance. Meals begin with offerings to the gods, steamy portions of bread, figs, and roasted goose placed on altars, and then proceed to grand feasts and exotic fruits brought from Nubia and the Levant. Your table is not a piece of wood, but a low platform of stone or bronze, your dishes painted faience or precious metal, and yet even here in this slow and silken life, structure reigns. Each hour has its rhythm, ritual baths, offerings to the household gods, reviewing scribes' reports from your estates or temple holdings, and perhaps sitting in judgment over disputes brought by your tenant farmers. For the most powerful among the elite, including priests of Amun or royal administrators, days are filled with complex religious and administrative duties. Many elites also held priestly ranks, not as spiritual vocations, but as political stations. To serve a god like Amun or Padawaz, to manage land, receive offerings, and oversee temple wealth. Attended by fan-bearers and shielded by elaborate parasols, all while the common people knelt to receive your blessings, to hope for your favor. Your private chambers are cool and shadowed, decorated with scenes of the afterlife, where you hope to join the gods in comfort and eternity. Book of the Dead to guide your ba and caw your soul and spirit through the trials of the duat. And when death comes, as it eventually must, even to the most perfumed and powerful, you are embalmed with rituals lasting 70 days. But even then, the elite remain in motion, carried to eternity by artisans like those of Deir el-Medina, their wealth buried with them. And now, as the Nile flows silently beneath a canopy of stars and the desert cools to stillness, We end our journey not with a battle or a coronation, but with a sigh, the hum of insects in the reeds, the rustle of linen, the flicker of an oil lamp in a stone chamber, and the velvet stillness of a noble's house. Imagine yourself waking in the dim light of an insula, a multi-story apartment, building that is home to everyone from laborers and tradesmen to the lower middle class of ancient Rome. You find yourself 6 floors up, where the narrow stairs are worn smooth by the tread of generations. The air is heavy with stale smells of sweat and cooking oil. The walls, patched with rough plaster, creak as you ascend, each step a reminder of the building's precarious construction. There is no running water here. Instead, you rely on a public fountain a short walk away for your daily bath. The journey is fraught with challenge: the crowded corridor, the occasional spill of water, and the ever-present clamor of neighbors and street vendors below. As you pass a window, you see a scene that is both ordinary and troubling. Cramped rooms with little ventilation, families huddled together, and the persistent blur of activity that speaks to a life lived on the edge of comfort. Inside your modest room, you find little luxury. The bed is little more than a straw mattress laid upon a simple wooden frame, when your clothes are few, worn and mended repeatedly. A chamber pot sits silently in one corner, a necessity rather than a convenience, while the limited light from a flickering oil lamp casts long shadows across your meager belongings. Every sound, from the distant clatter of cartwheels to the close murmur of conversations in the hallway, underscores the fact that privacy here is a luxury long forgotten. Throughout the day, you must navigate the narrow, overcrowded corridors. The building itself is notorious for its instability. Reports speak of collapsing floors and crumbling walls during heavy rains. You hear whispers of families forced to flee when their insula was deemed unsafe, yet many remain bound by necessity and an unspoken resilience to the harshness of urban life. Meals are simple, perhaps a piece of coarse bread, some olives, and a bowl of watery porridge shared with your neighbors, who huddle together for warmth and conversation. Noise never ceases. While the city outside bustles with commerce and construction, your home is an echo chamber of footsteps, voices, and the occasional shout from a disgruntled landlord warning of rent increases or repairs needed. Imagine yourself, day after day, enduring the constant strain, your back aching from climbing those steep, rickety stairs, your ears attuned to the incessant sounds of the crowded city, your senses overwhelmed by the mingled odors of cooking, waste, and the ever-present dust. Even at night, sleep is fitful. The thin walls do little to mute the sounds of the bustling street and the occasional sounds of distress from a neighbor in need. This, then, is the life within an ancient Roman insula, a continuous, unrelenting struggle for stability, a place where each day is a small, constant battle against the elements, against decay, and against the harsh realities of urban existence. It is a world defined not by monumental triumphs, but by the quiet endurance of those who continue to live there, day in, day out. And so, as you imagine yourself in that cramped, creaking building, 8, let the rhythm of their struggles lull you a steady heartbeat in a world that, though harsh, carried its own unspoken dignity.
No, let us drift away from the cramped confines of the insulae and into a night where the sky turned red over the heart of the empire, a night that forever changed the fabric of the city and lives of countless Romans. Let us explore the great fire of Rome. It is the year 64 CE, in the reign of Emperor Nero. The summer is hot, dry, and still. The stone-paved streets of Rome are quiet, save for the low murmur of night activity vendors closing their stalls, stray dogs sniffing at the refuse, the quiet footfalls of the watchmen making their slow rounds. You can imagine the smell of warm dust and smoke from hearth fires hanging in the stagnant air. But soon, this quiet will be broken. According to most accounts, the fire begins in the merchant stalls near the Circus Maximus, perhaps sparked by an oil lamp knocked over, or a careless ember from a baker's oven. Fires are common in Rome. It is a city largely built of timber, mud brick, and tightly packed thatch. But this one is different. The wind is rising. The flame catches, feeds, and spreads. Now, imagine yourself as a resident of one of the insulae nearby. It is the early hours, and you are awoken by the crackling of flame, the strange glow on your ceiling, and the unmistakable shouting of panicked voices outside. There are no fire alarms, only human screams and the dry heat rushing in through your open shutters. You gather your few belongings, a blanket, perhaps a coin pouch, and stumble into the hallway. The wooden staircase is already beginning to groan with heat. There is no time to gather more. All around the district, chaos unfolds. Flames leap from roof to roof, hungrily consuming balconies, shutters, and awnings. Embers are carried on the wind to ignite the next block. The narrow alleys, once a maze of quiet pathways, are now death traps. Crowds push through, choking. Smoke. Some attempt to form bucket lines using water from public fountains, but it is hopeless. The fire rages for 6 days. It consumes entire districts, homes, shops, temples, and even granaries. Of Rome's 14 administrative regions, 3 are completely destroyed and 7 are heavily damaged. Priceless artworks, public archives, shrines of ancient origin, lost in flame. The fire is so vast that even the mighty stone structures, once thought indestructible, suffer. The temple of Jupiter Stator is damaged. Parts of the Palatine Hill catch fire. In the aftermath, Rome is barely recognizable. Its core has been hollowed out. Now, let us turn to Nero. He is famously associated with the fire so that legends would claim he played the lyre as the city burned. But this, most historians believe, is apocryphal. In truth, Nero was not in Rome when the fire began. He rushed back from Antium and took steps to aid the displaced, opening public buildings to house the homeless and arranging food supplies. But rumors nonetheless swirled rumors that he had started the fire intentionally to clear land for his own grand building projects. What we know is this: Nero soon ordered the construction of a new palace complex. The Domus Aurea, Golden Hausa, sprawling estate adorned with gilded walls and artificial lakes. Built right upon the newly scorched ground, the timing, understandably, raised suspicion. But what truly stoked public anger was whom Nero blamed: the Christians. Still a small and largely misunderstood sect in Rome at the time, Christians were scapegoated for the fire. They were rounded up, accused of arson, and subjected to brutal punishment. According to the historian Tacitus, some were torn apart by dogs, others crucified or burned alive at night to light Nero's gardens. Through the haze of history, it is difficult to separate myth from truth. But what remains clear is the devastation the way a city built of flammable ambition and timber could be undone in a matter of days. And yet, out of the ashes, a new Rome began to rise. In the aftermath, new building codes were introduced. Structures were required to have greater spacing, to be constructed in part from stone rather than timber. The city was, in a way, but for many, especially the poor who had lived in the very insulae. We described earlier the fire had taken everything. Let us now step back from this smoke and rubble, and travel from the pages of Tacitus and Suetonius to the quiet work of archaeologists.
Now, we leave behind the crowded streets of central Rome and the scorched chaos of the Great Fire, journey westward down the old Via Ostensistu, the mouth of the Tiber River. Here lies Ostia Antica, the ancient harbor city of Rome. Once a vital link between the empire and the Mediterranean, it is now a sprawling archaeological site, remarkably preserved and hauntingly silent. Let us walk its stone-paved streets together under a gentle sun, with warm dust beneath our feet and the faint cry of gulls overhead. Ostia was Rome's commercial lifeline. Grain, wine, oil, and goods from across the empire flowed into its docks. But unlike Pompeii, Ostia was not frozen by volcanic ash, declined slowly over centuries, and was eventually abandoned and covered by silt and time. What makes Ostia so remarkable is not just its preservation, but what it preserves. Here, among quiet ruins and climbing ivy, stand some of the best preserved insulae in the Roman world. You might find yourself standing before the Insula of Diana, one of the tallest surviving Roman apartment buildings. Still reaches 3 stories high, its brickwork remarkably intact. Its name comes from a shrine to the goddess Diana found within, perhaps placed there by a pious resident, or as a neighborhood protective symbol. Let us enter slowly. The doorway is narrow, and the interior cool and dim. A small taberna, or shop, occupies the ground floor, perhaps once selling wine or bread, with a back room for storage and a loft for the shopkeeper's family. A steep staircase leads to the upper floors. Each level holds cramped rooms, arranged around a shared corridor or a tiny courtyard. Walls still bear traces of painted plaster faded reds, and ochres and mosaic floors whisper of ordinary beauty. In one room, archaeologists found a hearth, the ashes of a long-dead fire, and cooking pots still in place untouched for nearly 2,000 years. In another, graffiti scratched into the wall reveals the frustrations of daily life. A tenant cursing his landlord, another boasting of his drinking feats. The apartments vary in size and status. Some had running water and small private latrines. Others did not. A wealthier family might have a small atrium and separate sleeping chambers. A poor tenant might live in a single room with no windows, little more than a dark cell. And yet within this shared structure, this early form of high-density housing, there was community. You can almost hear the noise echoing off the stairwells. A child crying, a couple arguing, a neighbor shouting a greeting. The creak of rope from baskets being lowered from upper windows to street vendors below. The smell of olive oil and fish sauce, of wet laundry drying in the sun. Ostia's insulae reveal so much more than just bricks and mortar. They reveal rhythm. It's the rhythm of Roman urban life. Its compromises, its bustle, its ingenuity. Nearby, you might stumble upon a Falonica, a laundry workshop, where clothes were cleaned using clay, ammonia, and the urine collected from public pots. The floor is stained with centuries of work. Next door is a bakery millstone still standing where grain was ground and bread baked for the neighborhood. Down another street lies a public latrine with marble benches and a flowing water channel below. Graffiti here too. Jokes, names, love notes. Even in the lavatory, Romans left their marks. This city, this ghost city, offers something different from textbooks and triumphal arches. It offers quiet, domestic truth. We see that Rome was not just marble forums and heroic statues. It was also cracked tiles and leaky ceilings, neighborhood gossip and evening meals, modest dreams and shared walls. Even in the bones of these ruined buildings, the human presence lingers. When you close your eyes, you can still imagine the footfalls on the stairs, the sound of a door slamming, the soft glow of an oil lamp behind a curtain. And now, as we leave Ostia behind, we return one final time to the heart of Rome, not to the crowded apartments or the public forums, but to the upper echelons. In our final segment, we will step into the atrium of a Roman domus and see how life unfolded for the elite. Where the ceilings soared and the floors shimmered in mosaic, where the air smelled not of smoke and sweat but of incense and polished marble. Welcome now to a different world, a world only a handful of Romans ever knew firsthand. The heavy wooden door opens slowly, swinging inward on bronze hinges. You step across the polished threshold into the atrium, the heart of a wealthy Roman home. Instantly, the air changes. It is cooler here, perfumed faintly with lavender and oil. Sunlight pours in from the compluvium and open space in the ceiling above the central pool, the impluvium, which collects rainwater below. This is no insula. This is the domus of a Roman patrician, a member of the upper class, perhaps a senator, a high-ranking magistrate, or a wealthy merchant. The house is quiet not because it is empty, but because it is managed, orderly, cultivated. Every object is in its place, every surface maintained by an unseen hand. Slaves move like shadows, cleaning the mosaic floors and arranging the lararium, the household shrine, where spirits of ancestors are honored with incense, wine, and small offerings. The mosaic beneath your feet may depict Neptune, Hercules, or scenes from Homer's epic siege tile, placed with painstaking care. A guest might wait here in the atrium for a morning salutatio, the daily audience in which the master of the house receives his client's lower status, citizens who come seeking favors, patronage, or advice. Some guests will receive a warm greeting, others a polite nod, some none at all. Hierarchy is everything. Let us walk deeper into the tablinum, a kind of study or reception room. It is open to the atrium on one side, and perhaps to the peristyle garden on the other. Here, scrolls line the shelves. A bronze inkwell sits beside a wax tablet on the desk. This is the business hub of the house, where political letters are written, accounts kept, and influence wielded. Beyond this lies the triclinium, the dining room. A luxurious space arranged with 3 couches, hence the name where guests recline on cushions and eat from low tables. A proper Roman dinner could last for hours, with multiple courses served by attentive slaves. Boiled eggs, honey-glazed dormice, oysters from Bai, roast boar and fig sauce, and delicate pastries filled with cheese and honey. Silver tableware glints in the lamplight. The walls are covered in vivid frescoes, red, gold, deep green, depicting gods, myths, or pastoral scenes. Every detail whispers status. Even the dinner conversation is curated. Literature, philosophy, politics, sometimes scandal, but never vulgarity. Now follow the path into the peristyle, the columned garden. Flowers bloom here in quiet symmetry, roses, violets, and lilies. Fountains trickle. Small statues of Venus or Pan peek out from shaded alcoves. 8. This is the soul of the house, where the family retreats for leisure, surrounded by beauty and serenity. In the private quarters upstairs, if the house has a second level, are the cubicula, or bedrooms. Some are spare and dark, others ornate. The master's chamber might contain a large bed, soft linens, a chest of jewelry, a collection of perfumes. Candles flickered gently. Outside the window, the din of Rome feels far away, yet life in the domus is not always peaceful. For the matrona, the lady of the house, the day is filled with management supervising slaves, preparing for guests, ensuring the household runs smoothly. Her influence may extend beyond the home, into family politics or temple patronage. For the paterfamilias, the male head pressure is constant. Status must be maintained, alliances navigated, political enemies watched. Every choice reflects on the family's name. And for the many slaves, perhaps dozens in a domus like this, the splendor masks a life of labor. Some are cooks, cleaners, scribes, others care for the children or manage the wine stores. A few might be highly educated Greeks, tutoring the family's sons in philosophy and rhetoric. Even in wealth, life is structured, controlled, and deeply stratified. The domos is not a sanctuary so much as a stage room, a performance of power. As the evening light fades, torches are lit. A musician plays a gentle tune on a lyre in the garden. Child chases a pet bird between the columns. Senator returns home, his sandals dusty from the forum, and a slave kneels to remove them at the door. Behind the elegance lies complexity, a world of appearances, responsibilities, secrets, and expectations. And so we come to the end of our long walk through ancient Roman urban life, from the cramped insula to the glittering domos. We've wandered dark stairwells and open courtyards, traced forgotten footsteps in Ostia, and watched a city burn and rise again. Rome was not just marble and empire. It was noise and dust, bread and fear, joy and exhaustion layered, like its buildings one atop the other. Imagine yourself waking before dawn, the chill of morning air clinging to your skin. The faint cries of roosters echo through the valley. You're not alone. Every house in your village is already stirring, smoke rising faintly from the low-thatched rooftops. Your home is modest, a small wooden structure with a dirt floor, a hearth near the center, and thin sliding paper walls that let in both light and cold. You sleep beside your family, huddled close for warmth. Privacy, like luxury, is something you've never known. Your role is predetermined. You are a peasant and your duty is to farm. You are part of the vast, unmoving class that supports the rigid hierarchy of feudal Japan I, in which warriors rule, merchants profit, and farmers, though officially respected, carry the weight of it all. Outside, the fields are already damp with dew, rice the backbone of society. The muddy paddies stretch across the valley like mirrors, reflecting the soft pink sky. You gather your tools, a shoulder yoke, heavy wooden buckets, and an iron hoe. These are passed down, repaired, reused. The earth will not wait. You trudge into the water, ankles submerged in muck. You spend the day bent at the waist, planting each shoot by hand, careful to space them evenly. The task is repetitive, meditative, and unrelenting. Rice cultivation demands discipline and an intimate knowledge of seasons and soil. You don't own this land. It belongs to a landlord, or perhaps a temple. And above him looms the samurai class, who exact taxes not in coins, but in rice. At the end of the season, your harvest will be measured, and most of it taken. It is not uncommon for your family to keep only what you can carry in your sleeves. Failure is not tolerated. Drought, pests, or illness do not exempt you. Should your harvest fall short, you will still owe. Debts grow silently, like weeds in the paddies. Social mobility is non-existent. You cannot become a merchant or a warrior. The code of Confucian values that underpins this world places you in your place and expects you to stay there. Your life is tied to the land, as your father's was before you, and his before him. Speech is rare. Respect is shown through silence, and silence is expected from you. When samurai pass through the village, you bow low and avert your gaze. They may punish rudeness, or even perceived insolence with swift violence, and no one will question it. You may not carry weapons. Even a kitchen knife might draw suspicion. Your clothing is simple rough woven, hemp or cotton, tied with rope. You walk barefoot in the fields. Sandals are for those with softer tasks. Food is scarce. A bowl of rice with a few pickled vegetables, perhaps a miso soup if the harvest was good. Meat is rare and, culturally, often discouraged. The body works hard and is fed just enough to keep going. Religion and ritual are woven into your life. You visit a local shrine to pray for good harvests. You place small offerings of rice at the household altar. Ancestors are remembered in quiet moments. Buddhism and Shintoism mix seamlessly in your daily practice, not as grand theology, but as guiding rhythms. Festivals do come. Once or twice a year, the village gathers. There's dancing, singing, even a little sake, if fortunes allow. But even joy is structured, governed by tradition. Your body aches each night, knees from kneeling, back from bending.
Ounce!
Fingers calloused, feet blistered. But there is no escape, and no complaint. And yet, in this life, there is a kind of peace. The same peace found in repetition, in the slow shifting of seasons. In the sound of cicadas on a summer night, or the way lantern light flickers on a paper wall, your world is small, but it is complete. It is as it has always been. And now, as the sun dips behind the mountains and the frogs begin their nightly chorus, you light the hearth, eat your rice, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. Let us now rise from the fields and walk toward power. In the next segment, we will follow the rise of a warlord whose ambition forever reshaped this quiet land. Let us leave behind the muddy fields and bowed heads of the peasantry and step quietly into the shadowed corridors of power. The rhythm of daily life for the common people may have been shaped by submission, but in the castles and battlefields of 16th century Japan, a different rhythm pulsed, one of ambition, upheaval, and change. At the center of this transformation stood a man both feared and revered, Oda Nobunaga. Imagine yourself now at the edge of a battlefield, not in the heat of violence, but in the still moments before it. The grass is wet with dew, the sky still pale with morning. There is an eerie calm, broken only by the distant sound of marching feet. This was Nobunaga's domain, not merely a place on a map, but a shifting landscape of loyalty, treachery, and war. To understand feudal Japan is to understand the force of nature that was Oda Nobunaga. Born in 1534. During the fractious Sengoku period of time known as the Warring States, Ira Nobunaga was the second son of a minor daimyo. His youth was marked not by formal ceremony, but by what many considered eccentricity. He was known as the Fool of Owari, dressing in garish clothes, acting brashly at public events, and showing little interest in the stiff traditions of his peers. But beneath this behavior was a mind already calculating, already defying the order he was born into. Nobunaga's rise began with consolidation first of his family's holdings in Owari province, then of his rivals. He employed both cunning diplomacy and overwhelming force. He was not bound by tradition, and this made him unpredictable. His forces used muskets still rare and unreliable, more effectively than any had before. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, he arranged his gunners in 3 ranks, firing in rotation while protected by wooden stockades. The resulting volleys devastated the cavalry of the Takeda clan and marked a turning point in Japanese warfare. But warfare was only one instrument in Nobunaga's symphony of power. He disrupted the rigid Buddhist temple structures that had held economic and political power for centuries. In a calculated campaign, he burned the great temple complex of Mount Hiei to the ground, an act both strategic and brutal. Thousands were killed, and the act sent a shiver through the nation. It signaled the arrival of a new order, one in which military might and centralized control would dominate. Nobunaga also sought to weaken the influence of the warrior monks and empower commercial towns, encouraging free trade and the movement of artisans. He understood the power of coin and commerce just as deeply as he understood the weight of a sword. He welcomed Jesuit missionaries and tolerated Christianity, not out of faith, but to undermine the power of established Buddhist institutions and to open diplomatic ties with Europe. Despite all his triumphs, Nobunaga's rule was not to last. In 1582, he was betrayed by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide. Trapped at the Hanaji Temple in Kyoto, Nobunaga realized there was no escape. Rather than fall into enemy hands, he chose seppuku, ritual suicide. Flames consumed the temple soon after, leaving behind ash, rumor, and a fractured succession. His death, however, did not end his influence. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one of Nobunaga's generals, swiftly avenged his master and continued the campaign of unification. In time, the Tokugawa shogunate would rise, cementing many of Nobunaga's reforms into enduring policy. But it was Nobunaga who had lit the fire that would reshape Japan, a fire of ambition, of ruthlessness, and a vision that defied the traditions of his ancestors. And so, as we step away from the echoes of marching boots and the distant crack of musket fire, we are left with a quiet thought, that even in the most hierarchical of societies, one man's audacity can shift the entire structure. Now, let us move again, this time, not toward conquest, but toward the hidden.
Ow.
Toward places where power is subtle and where silence is the sharpest weapon. Our journey continues in the shadows. To the secret villages of the ninja, now the air grows cooler. Believe the thunder of battle and the gleam of castles behind. Step quietly into the forested folds of the Iga and Koga provinces' mistraded valleys, nestled between jagged hills. The path narrows here, overgrown and silent. Birds call distantly, but even they seem hesitant. You are walking into a world designed not to be found, a world of secrets, patience, and unseen movements. This is the land of the shinobi. For centuries, the ninja were both feared and romanticized, shrouded in half-truths and mystery. But behind the smoke bombs and shadowy myths lies something more complex. Communities of farmers, monks, and minor samurai who mastered the art of survival in a time of constant war. These were not lone assassins, but members of tightly organized villages, living quiet lives by day and conducting secret missions by night. Let us begin in Iga, a remote and rugged region where geography shaped destiny. The hills were steep, the soil thin, the farmland poor, but the isolation bred resilience. The people here had no great lords to protect them, so they protected themselves first against bandits, then against ambitious warlords. Over time, they developed methods of self-defense that were agile, resourceful, and unconventional. These techniques, called ninjutsu, included more than stealth and swordplay. Shinobi learned how to climb silently, swim across moats with tools, read terrain like a book, and use natural poisons. They trained to endure hardship, going days without food, disguising themselves as monks, farmers, or traveling musicians. They mapped enemy castles from within, spread false rumors, and vanished without a trace. It was a craft, a discipline, and above all, a way of life. But the ninja were not mere mercenaries. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Iga and Koga regions formed something like self-governing confederacies. Councils of village leaders, often drawn from prominent families, made decisions collectively, protecting their neutrality with a network of informants and scouts. They refused to pledge fealty to any one lord, surviving by trading their services to rival factions. In an age when loyalty often meant death, neutrality was its own kind of power. This balance could not last forever. By the 1570s, the growing might of Oda Nobunaga threatened all who stood apart. In 1581, he launched a massive invasion of Iga with tens of thousands of troops, an overwhelming force meant not just to conquer, but to erase. The Iga ninja fought back with traps, sabotage, and ambushes, but the odds were impossible. Villages were burned, families scattered. The old confederacy was shattered. Yet the ninja did not vanish. Many fled to neighboring provinces, some entering the service of Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would one day become shogun. It was under Tokugawa's rule that the shinobi found a new role, not as warriors on the battlefield, but as watchers in the capital. They patrolled Edo in silence, sniffing out plots, tracking enemies of the regime. Their legacy became institutionalized, even as their identities remained veiled. Much of what we know about ninja today comes from stories written long after the fact, mythologized, repackaged. They've been transformed into sorcerers, superheroes, and silent ghosts. But the truth, if anything, is more fascinating. They were ordinary people who found extraordinary ways to survive. They adapted, hid in plain sight, and resisted the crushing forces of empire by becoming invisible. So as you lie there, listening to the faint breeze of mountain air and imagining dark shapes moving through bamboo groves, remember this? The ninja were not just shadows in stories. They were neighbors, farmers, strategists, survivors. Let us now drift even further back in time, beyond the samurai wars and mountain villages, to a more delicate age, when Japan's noble class moved to the rhythm of poetry, silken robes rustling through wooden corridors, and the subtle games of status and affection. This is the Heian period, 1,000 years ago, when the imperial court in Kyoto, then known as Heian-kyo, its height of aesthetic and cultural refinement. Imagine waking in a grand estate nestled within a walled garden. Sliding screen lets in the scent of incense and the distant pluck of a biwa lute. The day does not begin with labor or urgency, but with measured rituals. As a courtier, your existence revolves around appearances, etiquette, and subtlety. Even your handwriting, delicate and flowing, might be a source of pride or humiliation. Your clothing is not merely functional, it is layered, symbolic, and coded. The color of your robes changes with the seasons. Their arrangement may convey your mood, your political alignment, even your romantic intentions. For women, the Jani Hidowa 12-layered kamina makes each movement a slow and deliberate performance. Men wear long trailing robes with peaked caps and fans tucked elegantly into their sleeves. You do not work in the way the lower classes do. Your responsibilities lie in composing poetry, attending ceremonies, reciting sutras, and paying carefully calibrated visits to the homes of allies or lovers. Your worth is measured in wit, taste, and restraint. A misplaced word in conversation can wound as deeply as a sword. Your life is one of perpetual performance, subtle and serene, but never truly free. Much of court life revolves around correspondence. You rise late in the day and may spend hours selecting the right paper, ink, and perfume to send a poem to someone of interest. The content of the poem is less important than the illusion. It's the clever echo of a classic verse or the poignancy of a seasonal metaphor. A missed nuance could mark you as uncultured. At night, gatherings may be held by lamplight. Guests listen to poetry readings or view paintings while sipping sake. Conversations are soft, slow, and filled with layered meaning. Every gesture is calculated, every glance weighed. Love affairs unfold behind silk screens and folding fans often unconsummated, always agonized over in verse. Passion is veiled, idealized, and ultimately shaped more by imagination than reality. Yet behind the elegance lies unease. Court positions are precarious. Status is determined less by merit than by birth and favor. The Fujiwara family dominates the imperial line through strategic marriage. Ambition is real, even if its weapons are paper and perfume. Rivalries smolder under layers of courtesy. Outside the court's gates, the world is changing. Local clans grow more powerful. The samurai class begins to rise, indifferent to poetry and protocol. In time, this refined world will fade, its customs frozen in diaries and story scrolls. But for now, it still breathes, still sighs beneath the paper screens and pine-scented air. One of the most enduring records of this world comes from the Pillow Book of Sei Shonagon and the Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikabu, both written by women of the court. Their works reveal a world of exquisite beauty and quiet loneliness, where the smallest moment, a branch breaking in snow, a forgotten scent, a midnight breeze, holds profound significance. Picture yourself at the edge of a dense forest in Gaul. The sun is just beginning to rise over the misty hills, and the earth is damp from the night's dew. The chill clings to your wool tunic, though you know it will be gone by midday. You are not here to travel, but to build. You are a laborer in the service of the Roman state, one of thousands tasked with a singular mission: to build the roads that carry Rome's ambitions outward. This work is not temporary. It is relentless. The empire is always expanding, and new routes are always needed. Some laborers are soldiers conscripted to do this work during peacetime. Others are enslaved people, forced to toil without rest or reward. And some, like you, are low-born citizens drawn by a steady wage, however meager. Before the first stone is ever laid, the path must be cleared. Trees are felled by hand, no chainsaws, no machines. Just the steady thunk of iron axes biting into bark, and the long pull of ropes as roots are dragged from the ground. Shrubs are torn out, the underbrush burned away in smoky, choking fires. The surveyors grammatici have already passed through, marking the line with poles and chalk, straight as a thrown javelin. The road will not curve to suit the land. The land must bend to the road. Next comes the digging. The ground must be prepared in layers. You begin by cutting a trench sometimes a meter deep, or more scraping through clay and rock with crude shovels. Your hands are blistered, your back stiff from constant bending. There is no comfort here, just repetition. Swing, lift, dump, again and again. Once the trench is dug, it must be filled in layers. First, large stones often quarried nearby. You haul them in carts, or carry them with others, the straps biting into your shoulders. Then smaller stones are poured on top redis. It is called, followed by gravel mixed with lime. You crush it with heavy rammers made of wood and iron, compacting it until it feels as hard as bedrock. Finally, the paving stones are brought in. Heavy slabs of volcanic basalt, or limestone, cut with uneven edges. You and your team place them one by one, fitting them like a puzzle. Each must lie flat. No one will thank you for your care, but mistakes will be punished. These roads are meant to last centuries. All the while there is the sound of other men at work. Picks chipping at rock, the bark of a centurion's order. The creak of ox carts bringing more stone. The scent of sweat and earth mingles with the occasional waft of smoke from a nearby fire. Water is carried in skin bladders. Bread is coarse and dry. Breaks are brief. In some regions, the terrain resists you. In swampy ground, Timber must be driven into the soil to support the base. In mountains, the road must be carved along steep cliffs, with sheer drops below. You are not trained for this. Accidents happen. A foot slips. Stone falls. There are no safety rails, no compensation. And yet, there is something quietly impressive about what you're doing. Though you may not live to see it, this road will endure long after you're gone. Merchants will pass here with goods from the provinces. Legions will march in precise formation. Couriers will ride with urgent messages. Even centuries later, when Rome has faded, some of these roads will still be walked upon, their stones worn smooth by countless feet and wheels. At the end of a day's labor, you rest in a makeshift camp, a collection of tents or simple lean-tos near the construction site. There is little privacy. Your bed is the ground. The night air brings a biting chill, and the fire offers only modest warmth. You eat what's given. A porridge of grains, perhaps a bit of dried meat if you are lucky. You sleep to the sounds of low murmurs, creaking carts, and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. When morning returns, so too does the endless task. Another stretch of road awaits. There is no monument with your name, no statue, no poem. But without you and others like you, the empire would stand still. And as you close your eyes, drifting at last to sleep in your straw-stuffed cloak beneath the stars, you might find a quiet comfort in knowing that the stones beneath your body are now part of something larger, something that will outlive you. As we move from the everyday toil of the anonymous laborer to the grand stage of Roman conquest, the tempo shifts, though only slightly. The road builder's life was marked by repetition and hardship. Now, we place ourselves behind the measured, ambitious gaze of one of Rome's most powerful figures, Gaius Julius Caesar. During his fabled Gallic campaigns, it is the mid-1st century BCE. The Roman Republic, still clinging to the last generations of its old order, watches with interest and apprehension as Caesar rises. But we are not watching from the Senate or the streets of Rome. We are walking with his legions. Imagine the crunch of boots on fresh soil, the low rumble of hooves and cartwheels carrying baggage and siege gear, the ever-present murmur of orders being passed along the ranks. There's a rhythm to this movement, a tireless advance through the lands of the Gauls, the region that now roughly maps to France and parts of Belgium, Switzerland, and northern Italy. The Gallic Wars are not merely fought with swords and formations. They are wars of movement, wars of access. And access requires roads. Whenever Caesar planned a campaign, whether to cross a mountain pass, surround a stronghold, or swiftly reposition for advantage, his engineers would go ahead. They would survey the terrain, determine the most efficient course, and, if none existed, they would begin to build. The soldiers, though fierce in battle, were also expected to be craftsmen of war. You might picture them resting between engagements, but in truth, a legionnaire's labor never ended. When they weren't building fortifications or temporary camps, they were laying roads. Pioneers, ditch diggers, tree fellers. With tools on their backs, they could transform dense forest into open passage. Some roads were cut across marshland, others required leveling uneven hillsides, or the laying of timber over unstable earth. The Via Agrippa, though completed after Caesar, gives us an idea of the ambition involved. These roads weren't meant to last weeks. Many have lasted millennia. During one particularly bold maneuver in 55 BCE, Caesar ordered the construction of a bridge across the Rhine River, not just a pontoon, but a full timber bridge designed to impress and intimidate. In just 10 days, his army had spanned one of the greatest rivers in Europe, crossing it not with boats, but with purpose-built engineering. Then, after a brief show of force, they destroyed the bridge themselves, a clear message to the tribes beyond. The logistics of war at this scale demanded meticulous planning. Grain had to follow the legions, horses required pasture. The wagons needed passable paths, and every day the army advanced into lands unfamiliar, filled with natural barriers, rivers, ridges, ravines. Road building became a kind of invisible warfare, a struggle not just against the Gauls, but against nature. Cold rain falling through thick trees, mud clinging to boots, stones hauled from nearby quarries or hillsides, timber cut and hewn into supports. There were no shortcuts. There were only gradients to be climbed and foundations to be dug. And still, the march went on. The Roman road was an extension of Caesar's will. His letters and battle reports made their way back to Rome, later compiled as Commentary de Bello Gallico. He described not only the victories, but the roads, bridges, and fortifications his legions raised. His success in Gaul wasn't merely a matter of battlefield dominance. It was also logistical supremacy. Imagine again the movement of men, the murmuring language of Latin drifting through dense forest, picks striking stone, the thud of tamped earth, all in service to a man whose eyes were set on glory in Rome. While Caesar's name would be remembered for political drama and civil war, the roads built under his watch in Gaul stitched the region into Roman influence for centuries to come. Long after the fighting stopped, farmers and traders would walk those same paths. Some are buried beneath today's highways, their ancient stones repurposed or paved over, but they are there. And as the legions pressed on, so too did the hum of labor. Quiet, relentless, methodical, a campaign not only of conquest, but of construction, of endurance. In this world, progress was measured not only in victories, but in miles. Stone by stone, road by road. As we transition from the purposeful strides of Caesar's legions to the quiet, slow passage of time, imagine yourself wandering gently through the soft fields of modern Europe. The sun is warm, but mild. A gentle breeze carries the scent of grass and earth. And beneath your feet lie traces of a world long past. These are the lost roads of Rome. Silent, hidden, half swallowed by nature and history alike. Centuries ago, the roads that once carried soldiers, merchants, and travelers have faded from view. They now lie buried beneath layers of soil, beneath fields of grain, beneath the very streets of bustling cities. Yet, to the careful eye, and with the help of modern archaeology, their stories whisper softly. Imagine the surface of a quiet farm field. To the casual passerby it seems unremarkable, but beneath, ancient stones are laid with precision. Deep beneath the ground, beneath layers of soil and roots, rests the well-engineered base of a Roman via, a road designed to last. Layers of gravel and tightly packed stones, shaped to shed rain and hold steady against the weight of carts and horses. Excavations at sites such as the ancient Roman port city of Ostia reveal not only grand architecture, but the intricate network of streets and roads that connected people. Here, you might stroll along cobbled paths, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps and wagon wheels. Sometimes roads appear as faint lines on satellite images or crop marks, their shapes visible in the differing growth patterns of crops above. Archaeologists trace these subtle clues like a gentle puzzle, covering routes that once linked cities, military forts, and distant provinces. Along these forgotten roads, traces of the lives that traveled them emerge. Broken pottery shards, coins worn smooth, the occasional piece of jewelry or tool dropped or lost long ago. Each artifact adds a layer to the story, helping us understand who passed this way and why. Imagine the rhythm of the past. Traders carrying precious spices and silk from the east, farmers bringing produce to distant markets, messengers racing urgent news across provinces. The roads formed the arteries of an empire, pulsing quietly with life, long after the clatter of horses and footfalls faded. And yet, as centuries turned to millennia, nature reclaimed much of what was built. Forests grew over old paths. Rivers shifted course, washing away fragments of stone. Cities expanded, building atop the old foundations. Still, beneath modern pavement, fragments of these ancient roots survive. A subtle reminder of a time when the world moved differently. In some places, towns grew up around the crossroads of these Roman roads, small villages blossoming into market towns, then into cities. Roads that once bore soldiers became the quiet streets of ordinary life, with children playing where once armor clinked, and merchants bartered where once standards were raised. This gentle layering of time invites us to pause, to imagine the countless steps taken along these routes, and to appreciate the care and effort that shaped them. It was a labor of endurance, not unlike that of the workers who built them, slow, methodical, unhurried. As you picture this landscape, the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds fill the air. the stone beneath your feet steady and ancient. Imagine yourself no longer among the weary builders or the silent travelers on dusty roads, but instead nestled comfortably in a finely crafted litter, borne gently by strong, steady servants. This is the travel of a Roman senator, an entirely different rhythm, one of calm and ceremony, unfolding slowly beneath a soft canopy that filters the midday sun. The litter itself is a masterpiece of craftsmanship, polished wood, adorned with subtle carvings, cushioned with soft fabrics that carry the faint scent of lavender and rose. The air inside is cool and quiet, a quiet retreat from the dust and noise outside. Imagine the delicate sway as four bearers move in unison, their measured steps blending into a steady, soothing rhythm. Around you, the countryside stretches out in muted greens and browns. Fields of barley and wheat wave gently in the breeze. Olive groves and vineyards ripple across the hillsides, their leaves whispering softly. The distant mountains rise with a calm dignity, bathed in pale light. Along the route, small rest stops await. These are carefully planned pauses where the litter is set down, and servants offer cool water, refreshing wine mixed with honey, and simple fruits like figs and pomegranates. Shade is sought beneath spreading trees or in the cool arcades of roadside villas, where mosaics gleam quietly underfoot. Traveling by litter is not merely about comfort, it is a statement of status, a performance of power wrapped in leisure. Behind the scenes, a small retinue of attendants manages every detail, from the timing of meals to the arrangement of bedding, ensuring that the senator's journey is free from toil or worry. The roads themselves, though once bristling with the clamor of soldiers and merchants, now seem almost serene as you glide past. The chatter of townsfolk, the lowing of cattle, and the distant hum of a blacksmith's hammer form a gentle backdrop. It is a world balanced between nature and civilization, marked by the scent of freshly tilled earth and the faint smoke of hearth fires. In the evenings, the journey concludes at a villa perhaps belonging to the senator or a close ally, where the air is thick with the scent of lotus blossoms and the soft glow of oil lamps. Here, guests recline on couches covered with fine linens, and sipping sweetened wine known as mulsum, while musicians play gentle tunes on lyres and flutes. The conversation drifts quietly, often revolving around poetry, philosophy, or the affairs of the empire. Imagine the tactile sensation of cool marble beneath your fingertips as you rest your hand on a table, the gentle warmth of a nearby brazier, and the distant sound of water trickling through a garden fountain. These moments are a stark contrast to the grueling labor of road builders and the perilous journeys of common travelers. Yet even in this refined world, life is a rhythm of duty and display. The senator must carefully balance rest with responsibilities, letters to read, alliances to maintain, honors to attend. The slow, measured pace of travel reflects a world where power is asserted through presence and ceremony as much as through force. As your journey by litter continues, feel the comforting sway, the calm sounds, and the soft scents that envelop you. This is travel transformed quiet, deliberate, and designed to soothe as much as to impress. With this gentle image lingering, we close our exploration of the Roman roads and their people, from the tireless laborers who built the empire's backbone to the leisurely senators who traveled upon it. As you begin to drift, think of the layers of history beneath your feet and the enduring rhythm of those ancient paths. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into a narrow, dimly lit studio somewhere in Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. The air is thick, almost warm, heavy with the faint scent of oil lamps and crushed minerals, the raw materials of a painstaking craft. Around you, wooden tables are cluttered with delicate brushes, small bowls of pigment, and sheets of parchment or thinly stretched canvas. The flicker of flame casts soft, dancing shadows across walls hung with incomplete icons and sketches, images destined for the great churches or the private devotion of the empire's elite. Your fingers are stained deep with the colors of crushed lapis lazuli, malachite, and cinnabar. The pigments are beautiful but relentless, and some carry their own dangers. Lead and mercury lurk in the powders, invisible yet persistent, seeping slowly into skin with every careful stroke. Your eyes, tired from hours of fixed focus, feel the strain, a dull ache behind the lids. The tiniest misstep could ruin a delicate mosaic or an intricate gilded panel, and the master overseeing your work watches silently, expression unreadable. There are no words, only the weight of expectation, pressing down like the thick stone walls around you. Time seems to slow in this space, marked only by the steady scratch of brushes, the soft clink of gold leaf, and the occasional sigh as hands tire and back stiffen. Outside, the empire bustles and shines. But here, your world is small, ordered, and unyielding. Each day begins before dawn, with light barely brushing the rooftops outside. The cold seeps through the stone floor, settling in your bones. Yet, there is little warmth to comfort you. The work must begin anew. Every day a careful repetition of mixing colors, stretching canvas, and applying painstaking detail. Imagine the rhythm of this life, each stroke deliberate, measured, building slowly towards perfection. The hours stretch, blending one into another beneath the muted glow. Your hands move almost without thought, guided by long practice and an unspoken contract to the tradition and the faith that demands your art. Outside, sounds of Constantinople are a distant murmur at the creak of carts over cobblestones. It's the faint call of merchants, the occasional clang of a blacksmith's hammer. But inside the studio, it is a world apart, quiet, intense, and utterly consuming. Yet even in this dim place, there is beauty, a quiet majesty, born of dedication. The gold leaf catches the light just so, casting a soft glow that seems almost otherworldly. The painted faces and icons seem to watch with gentle solemnity, their eyes calm and deep, reflecting centuries of devotion and artistry. But this beauty comes at a cost. The long hours, the relentless attention, the toxic dust and the air all weave together in a life of hardship that few could endure for long. Imagine the gradual toll on body and spirit, the ache behind tired eyes, the calloused fingers that tremble from exhaustion. The master's gaze remains steady, rarely approving, always demanding more. Your place in the empire's grand design is small but vital, your craft, the hidden heartbeat behind the empire's dazzling splendor. As the sun sets and oil lamps are lit anew, the cycle begins again. The studio becomes a sanctuary of quiet perseverance, a place where beauty is born from toil, patience, and a constant gentle struggle. Imagine now, leaving the quiet world of the artisan's studio and stepping into the sprawling city of Constantinople during the 6th century, a city alive with bustling streets, soaring domes, and the shimmering waters of the Bosporus. At the heart of this vibrant metropolis ruled two figures whose lives would shape the course of Byzantine history: Emperor Justinian and his wife, Empress Theodora. Their story is one of contrasts, a soap opera rise to power that carried them from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of imperial authority. Justinian, born into modest circumstances, was a man of sharp mind and steady ambition. Theodora, once an actress and dancer, possessed a charisma and intelligence that few could match. Together, they forged a partnership that would navigate the empire through both splendor and upheaval. Imagine Justinian in his imperial robes, moving with calm authority through the grand halls of the palace. He was a ruler deeply devoted to law and order, determined to restore the greatness of Rome's legacy. His legal reforms, known collectively as the Corpus Juris Civilis, would echo through centuries as a foundation of Western legal tradition. Yet beneath the surface of calm there were storms. The Nika riots of 532 unfolded as a terrifying upheaval, crowds chanting, fires blazing, and the city in chaos. It was Theodora's steady resolve in those dark hours that is often remembered most vividly. Refusing to flee, she urged Justinian to stand firm, reminding him of the crown's weight and the empire's future. Picture her then, a woman of striking presence, clad in richly embroidered silks, speaking with quiet but unwavering strength. Her voice, a gentle tide of determination, helped steer the emperor through crisis. Together, they preserved the throne and shaped the empire's destiny. Theodora was more than a partner. She was a force in her own right. Her influence extended beyond the palace walls, championing causes such as women's rights and social welfare. In a world where power was tightly held and often cruelly exercised, her ascent was remarkable, a testament to intelligence and resilience. Their reign saw the construction of architectural marvels. Most famously, the Hagia Sophia, cathedral whose soaring dome would symbolize the empire's spiritual and political power for centuries. Imagine the grandeur of its space light filtering through countless windows, mosaics shimmering softly and the air thick with incense and reverence. But beneath the grandeur, their rule was also marked by relentless effort to hold together an empire under pressure facing threats from invading forces. Economic strain and internal dissent. It was a delicate balance, maintained through calculated diplomacy, military campaigns, and the intricate dance of court politics. Justinian and Theodora's story is one of ambition tempered by circumstance, a personal devotion woven with public duty. Imagine the long nights in the palace, candlelight flickering over maps and letters, the quiet conversations that shaped wars and peace alike. As we leave their story behind for now, carry with you the image of a city both dazzling and fragile, ruled by a couple whose strength lay as much in their partnership as in their power. Imagine yourself standing beneath the vast expanse of the Hagia Sophia's dome, a space so immense it seems to hold the very sky itself. The air is cool and thick with the faint scent of incense, and soft light filters through dozens of windows set around the base of the dome, creating a delicate, almost ethereal glow. It's a place where architecture and faith intertwine, a sanctuary built to inspire awe and contemplation. The dome itself is a marvel of engineering, one that has puzzled scholars and architects for centuries. Suspended seemingly by magic above the great nave, it rises over 180 feet above the floor, spanning more than 100 feet across. Imagine the builders, working with heavy stones and complex scaffolding, piecing together this colossal structure without the aid of modern machinery. They used a series of ingenious techniques, hidden arches, pendentives that transfer weight gracefully down to the massive piers below, and carefully selected lightweight bricks to reduce stress. This was a bold experiment in construction, one that pushed the limits of what was thought possible at the time. Yet, the dome's beauty is more than structural. The windows arranged in a ring around its base allow light to pour in, casting dancing shadows and illuminating the gold mosaics that adorn the interior. This interplay of light was no accident. It was designed to create a sense of divine presence, a celestial canopy that seemed to float, lifting the spirit gently upward. Over time, the dome has settled and shifted, enduring earthquakes and centuries of change. Pairs and reinforcements have been added, each layer telling a story of preservation and adaptation. The precise methods used in the original construction remain partly a mystery, a silent testament to the ingenuity of the artisans and engineers who worked in near silence under imperial orders. As you stand beneath this grand dome, feel the quiet patience of its stones, the echo of whispered prayers, the steady heartbeat of history that pulses through its walls. The Hagia Sophia is not just a building. It is a story of vision, perseverance, and the delicate balance between human ambition and divine inspiration. Imagine yourself stepping through the grand doors of the imperial palace in Constantinople, where the golden age of Byzantium unfolds in quiet elegance. The air is warm and fragrant, heavy with the scent of spiced wine, fresh herbs, and the subtle perfume of lotus blossoms carefully arranged in silver bowls. Soft flickers from countless candles and oil lamps dance along the richly embroidered tapestries and polished marble floors, casting a gentle glow that soothes rather than dazzles. You find yourself in a long hall, its ceilings vaulted high above, walls adorned with intricate mosaics depicting saints and emperors, their faces serene, watching over the gathering with quiet authority. The guests recline on plush cushions, arranged in orderly rows around low tables carved from dark wood, their surfaces gleaming under layers of lacquer. The feast itself unfolds slowly, each course a delicate offering crafted with care by a legion of skilled servants and cooks. Plates arrive bearing roasted lamb, tender and subtly flavored with fragrant herbs. Delicate pastries filled with nuts and honey. Fresh fruits like figs and pomegranates, their colors deep and inviting. Mead flows gently in goblets of silver, mingling with the soft murmur of conversation and the occasional laughter that slips through the calm. Musicians play quietly in the corner, flutes, lyres, and soft drums, weaving melodies that rise and fall like a gentle tide. Sometimes the silence is punctuated by the measured steps of courtiers, draped in silks and velvets, their gestures refined, their faces composed. Here, beneath the towering columns and the watchful eyes of painted saints, Power is both displayed and veiled, a slow dance of alliances and subtle influence. Imagine the emperor, robed in deep purple, his presence commanding yet calm, exchanging words with his trusted advisors. The flickering candlelight glints off the delicate embroidery of their garments, the intricate patterns telling stories of family, faith, and empire. In this rarefied world, life moves at a different rhythm, far from the dust and toil outside these walls. As the evening wanes, the feast gently fades into soft conversation and the clinking of glasses, the calm ebb of night settling over the palace like a comforting cloak. You breathe in the scent of lotus and wine, the echo of music lingering like a tender memory, and feel the steady pulse of a civilization both ancient and enduring.